took him.
It makes my day when I get Untitled
$5
Chapter.
or something, and she was like,
I love that.
"From now on, I'm paying you a penny a point."
Right,
Like,
you got too smart.
Yeah.
It's Tyler. Hey. So I made my dish for tomorrow night, last night,
Good.
and I got to taste it. I think it was my dinner
That's
last
good.
night.
My dry rub on my pork shoulder last night.
When you smoking? Tonight?
Time.
And 6, I think, is what we put out there. You know,
Nice.
I don't know. Jeff said he was going to start early, so we'll see what's happening.
So wait a
People start
minute,
showing
you're
up.
gonna start smoking when? At 6?
Oh, I don't know, either tonight or early tomorrow morning. Probably.
Do you have a really, really nice smoker? I'm thinking you're a pro here.
I mean, I actually use my Weber kettle grill and set it up as what's called the snake method, where you run the charcoal around the edge like this, and put a water pan in the middle, and you set your vents just so, and space
Wow.
wood chunks on top, and then
Wow.
you light separately in a chimney starter. You light like 6 or 8 bowls, and then you put those down in there on one end. Basically, you do it as a ring, but you leave a gap, right?
Right.
And so
You don't want it to be
set
direct.
here, and yeah, it's just like a fuse.
Cool.
And once you get
Oh,
your
wow.
vent set, man, I've had the thing go like 14 hours without
Wow.
refueling. You do have to basically take the upper vent and put it
things going on
across
here?
from where the fire is, so that it draws
Busy.
across. And so you do like every
That's good.
Wow.
I'm excited to see what the
I know.
result of this will be.
And
Now,
do you-
this is gonna be a
Do you
challenge
use a
with this
shoulder
rain.
or a butt or what?
It's usually a Boston butt. I just got like an 8-pound butt, like, and then just
Deadline.
David said he was cooking biscuits. so
I
hopefully he
know,
still
I was
is.
wondering, this could be awesome. You could have two different
The
types.
rain's gonna be
Maybe
a
a little
little,
bit clearer.
put a damper on it, but
Yeah.
I'll bring a popsicle.
It's
I
a
don't know what
slower,
Jeff.
it's a slower cook, right, when it rains?
That
Because
is, it's gonna definitely.
because the smoke doesn't escape.
It's just the moisture of the meat. Really mess with it, but I may cheat and just like smoke it overnight best I can, and if I need to, throw it in the oven
Put it in
and
the oven.
finish it off. But if you do it right, you get the meat to an internal temperature of 196, and that's when the molecules start to break down to where it basically pulls apart.
And how long at that?
That's when it all depends, right?
Right.
Humidity and temperature, and like, can take 8 hours, can take 24, like. It just, the problem with my method is that if it doesn't get there by the
Then-
time that the
you're
steak's
right,
done, then
then-
you're like, oh shit.
Then you're like in the oven and you're yeah.
If you have to, it depends. I mean, if it's
Just
for
not the
competition,
same.
then obviously
Yeah.
you can't do that.
Do you compete? Like
Well,
Mid-Atlantic,
no,
Kansas City barbecue?
No, God, no.
Oh,
Our family actually.
I dated a
hosts-
pitmaster. I know a
our-
lot about
our-
this.
Our family hosts an annual barbecue contest Labor Day weekend.
Wow.
Just your family.
Family and friends.
And everybody brings their own smokers in?
We
Oh
do
my
it- we
God,
do it at
that's,
our-
Sounds like we're in for a treat tomorrow.
you do it at your,
We've got a house in Dinwiddie County, so we do it down there and have like 200 people show up. You know, it's really hard to count how many people show up, but it's kind of a weekend festival. We make T-shirts. We have a Golden Pig trophy. We've got a panel of
and
judges.
it's all family or is it some
And
friends?
friends. I have a lot of friends. Yeah.
Wow.
You know, my cousin's band plays on the front porch.
And why aren't we invited?
Maybe you will be.
I have to be nice to you.
It's the
Okay,
it's called the
Badkey, come
bomb.
on.
It's the bomb. It's the big old Montrose
I'm not even
barbecue.
hungry and I'm looking forward to pizza.
Tomorrow?
Between the brisket and the roast.
Carl, you're a meat eater, right?
Yeah.
Hey, where are you?
Any vegetarians?
I think we had this question before and no one, I don't think anyone is. Okay.
Badkey said he picked up pizza at 5.
Does he know where we meet?
He's been to a meeting, right?
Yeah. That was tongue in cheek.
I'm like, get down here, we're hungry. I'm not even hungry.
I don't have his cell phone number. You got
Oh, he's a client of mine. Got him on or he's got me on fast dial. I'm not sure which it is. But.
So you can charge him for texting him then? What you're saying?
No, I don't do that. But I love how people make
Make
fun of
that
that.
joke.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I'm really gonna do we just doing an informal, we're not on or anything? We are?
For the mic on?
I also have this.
I mean, we are in a public meeting, 'cause, anyway.
That's my other.
So here's my question. Wow. So here's fraternity at UVA submit for artificial turf.
Gotta put the right condition.
I'm thinking this could be a,
As much as I feel
could be a
like,
moneymaker for the city of Charlottesville in application fees.
as much as I think that,
They all want to replace it over the summer.
as
You know,
much
the house
as every,
corporations that do it before.
as much as every application should be
Okay, wait a
seen
minute, I wanna
as
see
as a standalone application, I do have a feeling.
This one
that
has a precedent
might
setting.
start- I hate
But I kind
setting
of,
precedent, but
right.
this one.
But I kind of
probably
like how
Well, at least it's gonna-
tiny an area this is. I didn't see dimensions on it, but I'm.
It's
familiar.
tiny.
Yeah, it really is. It's
That's-
kind
It's
of a
really
perfect
hidden
setup.
with the hedge.
It
That's
really
it.
is.
Is what sets this one apart, is that it's
That's-
not very visible.
You don't have to look at it.
Hey, David.
Hello.
Haven't seen you in a while.
Have you already started your brisket?
No, I haven't. I haven't.
You could decide not to do it. We might have enough pork product. Okay, let me see.
Take
I
out.
tried. I can't find a big piece of brisket.
Wow, this is nice. The zucchini
just-
look even better. I know.
So yeah, I mean that was a
It's
10th
serious.
10th anniversary present. So it's, sidecar smoker box, the charcoal, and the
Right.
gas grill, and the single wide burner. So it's got everything.
Be a
It's
while.
'cause it's-
Once we had
because
kids,
it
it's
says
The
it's
meeting
right
will
now.
be another
Being entertained
45
by,
minutes longer.
not a big gas
Smoking
grill.
methods over here.
But
One thing I do like cheating on though, that I learned from the Oklahoma Joe website, is you take your chimney starter full of charcoal and then just put it on the single wide burner. Just use propane to get the chimney starter going faster.
really,
It's just saves you 10, 15 minutes. Like,
Propane and charcoal
yeah,
together.
just get it
Do you
going.
live over there? Eaton Road, which no one knows, so it's off of Jefferson Park Circle. Some people know. It's way back in there.
are you traveling this summer?
I'm across the street.
A little bit. Gotta go for a work project on Friday down to Florida. For the weekend.
A nice part of Florida?
Williams?
A good.
So there's
Yeah,
two.
North Florida, north the Panhandle.
Oh, nice.
Living in Charlottesville, I knew both.
Like around Destin or.
Young guy, dark
That
hair.
area.
I don't know.
And then we're doing I'm glad it's not this week.
Celebration.
We're going to, no, I'm not going to celebration.
I'm kidding.
I'm going to
So, Brian
hike
worked
the
at
AT in Shenandoah, which is 100 miles, over with my wife and my partner and his wife.
What did you call that portion of the AT? What?
In Shenandoah.
Oh, in the park.
The AT in the
It's 100 miles.
it's 100
Who
miles.
do that?
5 or 6 years.
And how long will that take?
A week. We're glad it's not this week, because it would be
And
wet.
it's a summer?
Yeah, in 2 weeks. We leave
Whenever I
in a
say
week from
5
Sunday.
years, but I've been looking at the
So
calendar.
north to south or south to north?
We're going south to north.
We've been there 30,
So
so.
what, around Front Royal or where is
We've
it?
been
Yeah,
there
it's
30
up
past
north.
by
Yeah,
after 10.
up north from.
And then where's the
We
southernmost
still
one?
have the same.
Oh, it would be.
64.
All
Right.
sides, that's
Oh,
why
that
we
makes
moved in.
sense.
That's nuts.
So it's kind of.
I forgot. I was thinking that it's continuous. I was thinking of Blue Ridge Parkway.
Well, it is.
It is.
Yeah.
Pretty continuous.
No, it's
Yeah.
great.
Depends on which line you take, but, yeah, we can do
Yeah,
that.
Robertson's good.
We'll go up to Vermont for a little bit.
Ooh,
He rents it out.
yeah, like, and we're hungry for pizza and he's passing around pictures like this. That's beautiful.
See, James, the
Are
reason
those
I
just-
believe in the
are those portfolio?
stove finishing is because I try to get a second round in. Because I'll start usually at 5 or 6 and then go to about by 3 or 4.
You start at 5 or 6 in the morning?
Yeah, and then by 2 or 3 or mid afternoon, the shoulder will have enough smoke in it. It won't be done, but I'll take it off. But then I can get another round of ribs in after that. So,
Wow.
and I learned to never do it on the day that you're. I don't do it on the day that I'm serving.
Not-
It's
but
it's
I thought
hard.
you had
Yes,
vegetarians
it's
in your household.
Yeah,
You don't care?
but I'm from Kansas City, so it's kind of
That's good.
cancels each other out.
Need to
He
get
brought
some
4 pizzas.
Hey.
Holy moly.
tips from you.
Guess there's gonna be some extra.
I've never won my own contest. I've been doing it for
Do you inject your shoulder?
not typically.
Jeff.
I wouldn't mind getting some tips from Kansas City.
like?
It's not going so well, actually.
How are you? Thank you.
I swear this is more
Oh
people.
my gosh, look.
More people than
We
I've
have
seen in the
Ludwig,
Bay
we have
Area.
Garrett.
It's like the short.
I'm surprised they haven't like reopened some
Wearing
ride.
a trash bag.
I never went, but yeah. Right,
2
right.
minutes late.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe, I don't know.
Well, I mean, like, so there's, like Iron Will, that I actually have been to, but I've seen pictures of it, and it looks like it's, I mean, it costs, I think it's like $60 a month, which, I mean, that's, it, but it's got nothing.
But they didn't do it right. Sure. Well, so, in our notes, we said, and they put 1 foot back.
See if it passes Carl Muster.
Brick course works.
It just looks real. A little shiny.
I would not.
It looks how I want my grass to look.
He's got memories in there, but I don't know if it's the skin.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes sense.
And he drew it and then said, that's a question we can have.
Oh, and Susan's here too. This is fun.
Oh,
You know what I mean? Like, it's, I guess I'm also curious about the limestone
I don't know.
Part of me would want it to be more random, because then.
I never wear headphones on. I'm the weird one that's like, but I completely zone out, so I don't even know what noise
Wait a
is.
minute. This
The
is
only
your
time I
song.
notice something is like someone standing right next to me. That makes me insane. I have like this huge space bubble, and if it gets invaded, I'm just like, no. Yeah.
Here's the protest here is James.
Yeah.
I mean, I know what AstroTurf is like.
You ready, Jeff?
Smell-o-vision. It smelled like grass.
I wasn't into lifting and weights and stuff, so
AstroTurf is
I still do it all the like little baby machines.
You ready, Jeff?
I know.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the regular monthly meeting of the Charlottesville Board of Architectural Review. We are meeting here in person in City Space, and we're also streaming live online, and we may have some people attending virtually. The meeting process is as follows. For each item on our agenda, the staff will make a brief presentation, followed by the applicant's presentation, after which members of the public will be allowed to speak. Speakers shall identify themselves. Please speak into the microphone so that those online can hear you and give your address. Members of the public will have 3 minutes to speak, first to ask questions, then we will move to comments, and public is also has a chance to speak for 3 minutes and for comments on the proposal. Public comment should be limited to the BAR's jurisdiction, that is regarding the exterior design of the building and site. After our discussion and before the vote, the applicant will be allowed up to 3 minutes to respond for the purposes of clarification. So thank you all for being here tonight. The first item on our agenda is for matters from the public that are not on the agenda, or if you'd like to speak to the consent agenda. The consent agenda tonight is only one item, and that's the meeting minutes of April 18th. Are there any matters from the public not on the agenda? Nope. Okay, we'll move to the consent agenda. The only item, as I just said, is the meeting minutes from April 18th, 2023. Is there any comment, or do I hear a motion?
I'll move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
All right.
Mr. Chair, I need to abstain. I wasn't at the meeting.
Okay, thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No. And one abstention. Okay, thank you. Move to deferred items. First item on that part of the agenda is 180 Rugby Road, a certificate of appropriateness application.
This is, before you, it's 180 Rugby Road. It is a contributing structure within the corner ADC district. The property, this came to you last month and was deferred, as you recall. The structure was built in either 1927 or 1929, depending upon the record. It was designed by architect Stanislav Mikulski for the Beta Theta Pi fraternity. It is Georgian Revival with 5 bays. It's a 2.5-story brick building with hip slate roof and 2 hip roof dormers. This came to you in May with a request to, there's some landscaping work to be done. That some of it is not, some of it's just maintenance and repair and cleaning up the grounds. The request for the change are 2 brick piers at the gate, or gate piers, there's no gate, at the front walk, some steps and landscape lighting that'll be installed on either side, and some pavers. And then the primary feature for the discussion is the installation of artificial turf on the front yard of the 2 sections, each side of the entry walk going in. And at the meeting in May, you all had asked for additional information about the turf, particularly the drainage. I don't know, Ian, were you able to get a piece? Okay. And you had asked that the brick pier not be less than 20 inch by 20 inches, and which that's reflected in the design. The recommendation that it replicate, that it respond to the design at the house, but not, that it respect the house. So the stone cap has a profile on it that's taken from the pilaster at the entrance, and the brick coursing will be similar to that on the house. And with that, staff, as with last time, really no issues with the elements to this project, but there's obvious questions about the artificial turf. All right, it's over there by David. And I think that, our recommendation is, if it is approved, there's some things that I've put in there. You're certainly welcome to tinker with the language a little bit, but I think it's, one of them is primarily that, and I, having been in college and having been in a fraternity, know what happens. The grass stays flat; it doesn't become a putting green or a lacrosse field or whatever, and with painted lines on it. So, and then I think there's the other condition is that should this really start to look disheveled, then we can respond accordingly. I do ask that. Because I suspect that there will be other requests that come with this, particularly further down Rugby Road and some of the other fraternities where hard mud is the surface that they're dealing with. If there's something unique about this site, behind the hedge, for example, or the smaller area, that makes this preferable for this site, but maybe not for others, it would be helpful to express that in your discussions, just such that we have, maybe establish a little bit of guidance for the next thing that comes in. And for example, the extreme, someone says, we're going to install artificial turf on all 4 sides of the fraternity house or sorority house or any house. So if you have any thoughts about that, that would be helpful. But I think we've laid out pretty clear, the staff's recommendations, and I know Ian and Garrett are here tonight to present or answer any questions, and I'll hand it over to them, unless you have any questions for me.
I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
So you implied that if it gets disheveled, there's something that can be done.
I mean, in the maintenance and repair provisions of the ordinance allow. We can do that for any property that's designated if it seems to be the roof's falling off, the windows are falling down. You know, if it is detrimental to the visual, you know, the character of the district, you know, we can cite someone. So I don't know, maybe if there's, you know, if it's, are there things that you, like, I know turf will start to flatten over the years. Is there, you know, if there's anything particular about turf that, you know, would say, all right, well, if it reaches this point, that to us is I don't know the answer. It's just a thought that came to me. Because I've dealt, I mean, as a coach, I've dealt more with the turf than, and I know some fields it's fantastic for years, and then, you know, after fifth or sixth year, it's just a flattened, you know, with all the little pellets everywhere. So
Since you've been with the city, have you cited anyone for maintenance?
we have a citation is a zoning violation. We have let people know. I'm not a zoning official, so I have not cited anyone. And I know that I was done a little more regularly before. But no, I have not cited anyone. I have let people know that it would be advisable to address something.
Would the applicant, would you guys like to speak at all? Okay. Yeah, no, we,
The applicant, if Jeff doesn't know the answer. On the site plan, it says not drawn to scale. I just wondered what the dimensions of this area are.
Of the area of the yard or the?
Yeah, the two areas, like total square footage. I mean, I'm familiar with the property, but.
well, let's let the applicant
Yeah.
speak, and then we can ask the,
I thought maybe Jeff
yeah.
did. Sorry.
He's pulling that up.
I remember it being something like 16 by 52, but I would have to pull up the.
Each of them is 16.
No, the entire front yard.
It's about,
It's
from that window to that wall. It's pretty small, with the sidewalk divided into two sections.
I only ask because we're setting maybe some precedential value, for lack of a better word, tonight with this, if we were to approve, or if we weren't to approve, and the exact dimensions would be helpful in the future, for, like, if somebody comes with a much larger one and, you know.
I can get those off GIS and get some estimates
Okay,
for
thank you. I mean, I know it's relatively,
Yeah, I would venture to say it's one of the smallest front yards on Rugby Road, which is part of the problem. It's part of the reason why it won't sustain a stand of grass. It simply won't. I mean, and, you know, what we're looking at for us is, it's the best solution for us and for Rugby Road. We don't want to roll out sod every fall and then have it die in October, roll it back up, and go back to the mud. We don't want a pervious surface that's gonna create runoff that we can't manage. This is, I think one of the things you also requested was the installation standards. And you can see from those, there's gonna be a lot of earthwork to create the proper base and the proper drainage, so that this really is a pervious surface and the drainage is handled correctly. And the other thing I would say is, this is a $2 million plus property. We invested $1 million in it about 10 years ago. The front yard looks like hell. We're trying to invest more money in the property. I don't think it's fair to suggest that we're not going to maintain it in a quality manner. I mean, the only solution to that is leave it as it is or pave it. Neither of those is good. And this allows the water to run through. It'll actually be a cleaner surface. It'll be sturdy. And when it comes time, when Jeff tells us, And by the way, we do get we get other types of citations, when they're beer cans and when the trash cans are in disarray, we're commented upon, and when this becomes a problem, we'll replace it.
In answer to Ms. Lewis's question, the yard dimensions are 58 by 16 bisected by a 3-foot.
Sorry, could you repeat that again?
Yeah, could you speak into the microphone so those online
Yes,
can hear you?
absolutely.
Thank you.
The yard dimensions are 58 by 16 bisected by a 3-foot brick walkway.
Thank you. This is the moment for if there are any questions from the public, either here in the audience or online. And we'll move to questions from the board. Any questions?
So, do I understand correctly that you're gonna have a wood timber kind of around the perimeter of the lawn? That's how it gets held in place?
No, I don't believe that's correct.
Okay. Thought that was the detail that, well, I see 2 details on the cut
Oh,
sheet. you
yes,
sent
I'm
us.
sorry. Yes, that will not be visible.
Won't be visible.
The edging of it goes underneath the
Goes
product.
underneath,
It's my
okay.
understanding. I'm, of course, not the installer, so this is secondhand information.
Okay.
The detail makes it look like it would be visible.
If so, then I have misunderstood the installer.
58 by 16 less than 16.
Any other questions from the board?
Yeah, I do. I'm just curious, have you looked at any alternate, like permeable paving systems or alternate systems?
No, that would definitely be a measure of last resort for us. I think we certainly have not looked in that direction.
I'm just curious why. Why is that a last resort?
Just due to the sterile nature of it. I understand it's sort of a very public-facing area, but it is still home to a number of men. And I personally wouldn't want to have pavers outside my home. We want to give it as much of a residential look as possible, whereas pavers would make it much more sterile and much less hospitable.
And that's consistent with our view as the owners, and I'll point out that the front porch is about similarly 58 feet wide, but it's about 6 or 8 feet extended from the house, and that is cement. Okay, so we've already got that, and what you would be doing is just having 2 steps down and more impervious surface. We don't think that's attractive. We just, it doesn't appeal to us. Stretching around the side of the house and behind it are brick pavers. So we've used brick in those areas. The house is brick, just enough's enough. This was originally a yard. This was a front yard, and we want it to have the same feel that it originally was intended to have, not an impervious surface.
I have one more question. I'm sorry I wasn't here at last month's meeting. What's the projected life of this?
Should be 7 to 10 years. Could be less in this setting. We'll have to kind of feel our way through it and replace it when the time comes.
The installer will be providing annual service to kind of fluff it up and clean it up as needed. And they're providing a warranty, and this is what they do. They offered us 15 or 20 different similar but slightly different. We chose the Zoysia because of its durability.
I had a question on the brick piers. Y'all have them shown as 20-inch squares. Does that work out for your bonding? Like, does it match the brick at the house in terms of the width, the length of the brick to get a stretcher header stretcher?
I could not tell you.
Well, I exchanged an email with the architect, and it does. And you can see the bricks on that scheme. it's basically 2 bricks width, and he shows it kind of, 2 of the bricks are turned.
Yeah, the elevation and the plan don't coincide, correlate, but it looks like you could get it would be easier at 1'4" than it would be at 20 inches. But I think the proportions here, are, to my eye, feel okay, and I appreciate the fact that you all came back to us since we asked you to give us a detail and show us what you're intending.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the board? Do we have any comments from the public, either here in the audience or online? And just holler if we have any. Move to comments from the board.
I'll start. I think, first of all, I totally appreciate your explanation of why you want what you want, and it makes total sense to me. However, I'm still kind of in the same mindset of last time you came. And the reason being is I think, and for me, this is precedent. It's just, number one, I just don't feel as if the material is appropriate for the particular context. Not that the material isn't appropriate for certain places, and I guess I refer to the, directly to our guidelines under plantings. Number 8 says select mulching and edging materials carefully and do not use plastic edgings, lava, crushed rock, or naturally colored mulch, or historically unsuitable materials. So for me, it's a precedent-setting thing, and that sort of tempered with the size of the space. It's such a small space. I think I made the same comment when you were here the other month, that I do feel as if, when you're saying paving, I feel like there could be some really lovely opportunities to do a hardscape that could be permeable. I think there's an easy way to manage drainage in this particular case. I think of when I lived in like Old Town Alexandria, and our front porch was literally like the brick. There was an extension of the brick sidewalk, and maybe I'm just coming at this with a certain prejudice, but I always thought that was just a lovely front yard, and especially for the amount of foot traffic that this is going to get, the kind of activity that's going to be had on that turf. It might work out just fine from a functional standpoint. I don't know, but it seems to me a hardscape would be a more suitable material for the current use, current function. And then there's just also just kind of the sustainability standpoint for me of putting plastic down, and if we keep replicating that, that's not really the best use of our resources either. So that's just my opinion.
I just interrupt up, put an image up there just quickly to kind of help visualize the red is the house, then there's this front porch, so that you see both, roughly what at least GIS roughly gives you for dimensions. So that just helps visualize it, that's all.
All right, so I guess start with the brick piers, actually. I think that if the intent is to match the Flemish bond of the house and build the piers sized such that they match that with a, stretcher header stretcher, and don't have cut bricks to make the 1'8" measurement, then that's what I'd prefer to see as the design intent, and I'm okay with that. If it ends up being 18 inches instead of 20 or whatever, once you get your mortar joints in there, just making it look right is what I'm hoping the intent is, and not just a hard set 1'8". I'm okay with the limestone cap matching the profile detail of the pilasters of the house. I think that's a nice touch. And I think we discussed, hopefully setting these closer into the sidewalk and then letting the hedges grow to them. I think that helps I think you're trying to look for traffic control, and that should help, so. In terms of the artificial turf, it's definitely a struggle. I've batted around in my head a lot. And I work at the university, so I'm familiar with the area, very familiar with it. And just as an example, I guess, the Bailey Museum, which is right up the street, had a middle terrace, or has a middle terrace, that was once grass and is now paved with bluestone pavers. I think for some of the same reasons. They probably had some maintenance issues, and it also gave them a gathering space, to use, which is hardscape. So I think there is a precedent in this district that shows that there is a solution of using hardscape in lieu of landscape, to achieve that same type of goal. So I'm still struggling with exactly where I'm landing on it, but I just wanted to bring that up as something else that's in this particular historic district that, did away with the original fabric, if you will, or the original landscape, and put something that was compatible and appropriate in the district, and is a good solution. So I think a paved surface here would work. It doesn't necessarily have to be brick. I think you can contrast it with bluestone or even concrete pavers if they're nice ones, and I think to David's point, you can do an underlayment that allows drainage and things like that. It's just tough to think that plastic grass is appropriate in a historic district, I guess. It's tough, but.
I'll jump into, basically agree with what's been said. I one of our a lot of our guidelines point to materials that are long-lasting, and I realize that landscape materials are not necessarily long-lasting, but this is, it's not grass anymore at this point. It's a constructed surface. You've got the hedges out front, which I think do a very good job of softening the project. If it was just brick pavers that came out to the sidewalk, then yes, I think there would be a problem. And then, grass or, I'm still leery of the precedent of the artificial turf. If you need to soften the area more, maybe there's an opportunity to put some more planted areas in that space. Maybe some small trees, something that wouldn't grow up and hit the power lines, but just to carve out some of the brick pavers that might, or whatever surface you end up putting down. But I'm with them in that I can't necessarily support the artificial turf.
I, for one, don't mind the artificial turf. I understand your desire to have something that feels soft underfoot, to be, the front of the house that you can hang out in, and something that's more comfortable than a hard paved surface. To me, this one is a little different than a precedent across all the front yards because of how hidden the front yard is with the hedge, with the piers. That I feel like it's an acceptable application of the product, and that the artificial turf could be used in this application. I do wonder, right at the front, at the brick piers, I feel like there is going to need to be a condition of what the detail at grade is, because I don't think you're going to want a small strip of the artificial turf, but you're also not going to want true grass in that little area. So I think there's going to need to be kind of a concrete base to bridge from the sidewalk around the brick piers, but I think the brick piers are appropriate, and would think that the artificial turf's okay in my point of view.
I agree. I think the artificial turf, if we didn't know if it was artificial, I think people driving by wouldn't even know. I think this stuff has come a long way from the carpet that I played on in '92. So, I think it's hard for us to judge it because you're staring at a piece of plastic. But I think if you didn't even know that that was plastic, I would think that was grass. I do understand the historic part of this and also the idea of maybe having that concrete jungle in front of your house when you want something green. So I'm in agreement. I'm okay with it.
Well, I actually agree with most of what's been said. I agree on the one hand that a more appropriate landscape material for this particular situation would be a hard pavement, and I absolutely believe that it could look elegant and look beautiful. However, that being said, we are charged to assess what has been put before us, and not whether we think there's a better solution, but whether this solution actually detracts from the historic district and this historic property. And I agree with last couple of speakers that I think that this very particular situation, the installation is both small and screened, largely screened, and it's fully reversible. So I think that this is a unique situation. I do not want to treat it as a precedent for. I think we need to be very specific about if we approve this, why. But I'm in favor of the proposal. I think it's a better solution than its current state. I would certainly love to see a paved court. I think that would be more appropriate, but that's not what's before us tonight.
Thanks a lot, Amy. This is tonight. I am not going to object to this turf. I agree that it wouldn't be appropriate in a lot of places, and I would note even, I asked Mr. Zemer, in Mad Bowl, which the university a couple years back completely redid, it was muddy and grass wasn't growing in it. They chose not to do an artificial turf, and there really is natural grass there. So in a larger application, I would have a problem with it, but given the hedge and the size of it, I don't. As Breck said, I would prefer that you plant 2 trees in this area to shield the house from the western sun, and maybe put a bench near them as a staging area for people coming and going from the house, for brothers there, for parents, for visitors, and do some hardscape there. But that's not what's before us. That would be my preference, but that's not what you've asked us to approve. So I guess I would just note, because I don't know if it'll be really, the circumstances are really not part of our motion, because of the hedge and because of the small area and because of the fact that it's pretty much shielded from the public right of way and from other historic properties. I would be in favor of installation of this here.
If you wanted to, certainly can express an emotion, including the following, or, favorable, including the following. That's fine.
Any other comments? Anything that you guys would like to respond to?
To Mr. Whitney's point, we can certainly lay brick around the base of those 2 pillars, at least on the outside, on the sidewalk side, and I think we may have we'll look at butting the turf up to it, or, you know, depending on the installation techniques, it may be better to have brick, but we don't have any problem with that appropriate footer.
Did anybody have any comments on the lighting? I mean, I think it's a good idea to put some more site lighting in for pathways and whatnot, but I just want to make sure, because that was on the application too.
Yeah, one other comment is, I hope you will approve this because we're already getting close to the end of June, and part of our goal is not to have to come back again a third time with another design. But I understand, if we do, we do. We'd like to get this done in July and August.
Sure. Well, I'm not sure if I was getting do we need to do a straw poll, or would somebody like to make a motion?
Depends on who you want to make the motion.
I'll make a motion, Mr. Chair, just trying to find it, sorry. Had it pulled up and then grazed by it.
You know, can I just, I'll offer this if it's
Yeah.
helpful.
I yield to Mr. Warner.
I mean, I know we want to have the magic COA and, you know, for one thing, but this is, you know, it's one thing when it's an entire building, but within the landscape and there are pieces and parts. So I see nothing wrong if a motion's made for all the things that are fine, and that's okay. And then if you want to make a separate motion for the turf, I don't think that's a problem. But I think that the point being is that there are the piers, the lighting, things that if the motion is shot down, it doesn't shoot down the things that are, that the BAR would like to approve. Does that make sense?
Although if the motion gets denied, we just make another motion, right?
That's what we usually do.
Until we make a motion that says, you know, this does not meet the guidelines, I think we keep making motions, correct?
I mean, gosh, I don't know. But I think you can, yeah, you're our walking encyclopedia of BAR institutional memory, but yeah, I mean,
So I heard at least 4 people express support for the
I'm in support as
5.
well.
Okay,
I think you guys are good.
Yeah.
okay.
Can I make a motion?
But I do want to say that we should qualify, or at
Yeah.
least express that it's specific to this condition.
Yes.
Because no one here wants to see front lawns going down to the sidewalk with artificial grass. So I don't know how to qualify it.
Yeah.
in a motion.
I guess I agree with you, but we only, as a BAR, we're not modifying the guidelines, we don't make rules for all time. We can only really vote on the conditions that are in front of us, and I think to the extent that there have been comments about conditions here that augur for approval, that would guide us in the next application, but I'm not sure that making a motion saying that, you know, if it's less than this or more than this, these dimensions, and if it isn't shielded, then we would never approve it in the future. That's not part of what we do here, so we're, you know, our job is a lot more limited.
what I would do is somewhat like the motion last month for deferral where we added, you know, the BAR's comments or recommendations. So for this, I would include, you know, in the BAR's discussion, it
Got
was
your-
noted that this is reversible, that the current condition, you know, is understandably unacceptable. It's screened by a hedge and does not come all the way to the sidewalk, and that the size, the 2 small sizes, 2 sections, mitigates the impact. So I would reflect that in simply, not part of the motion, but in just how I would record it. So the next time a project came up, we'd say, all right, do we ever any artificial turf? And we'd look at this one and we would see those in notes.
So you're saying that's not part of a motion?
I don't think it's
Sorry, I
necessary.
heard
It,
You say both things.
I think we could say that as part of the
Could.
motion, as why we find it that it satisfies the BAR criteria.
I think the key is just that it's memorialized and not lost in the files for the next time. So either way works. But I would say if you are, expressing it in a condition, noted it's reversible, it's preferable to the existing, or to the current condition. It's screened by a hedge. It does not extend to the sidewalk, and it is two relatively small size sections.
Okay. Lord help me.
Like wigs, like they do.
Right, I know, I'm like. Having considered the standards set forth within the city code, including the ADC district design guidelines, I move to find the proposed landscaping plan for 180 Rugby Road satisfies the BAR's criteria and is compatible with this property and other properties in the ADC district, and that the BAR approves the application with the following conditions. That the turf will remain flat and the surface unaltered, meaning no logos, images, symbols, and other uses on this property, on the turf. The turf will be maintained, including appropriate drainage, removal or replacement will be required by the city if it's in disrepair or deteriorated. And I make this motion under these conditions because we realize that this is a reversible application, that it's screened well by a hedge. The area is not, the area is relatively small in dimension. It doesn't go to the public right-of-way or the sidewalk. And I'll add that there's no adverse impact on the historic assets within the district.
Second.
All right. Any further discussion? We'll call the vote. Mr. Zimmerman?
No.
Timmerman? Sorry, Timmerman. Mr.
Vote yes.
Mr. Pearl? Mr. Zimmer?
No.
Ms. Lewis?
Aye.
Mr. Whitney?
I vote yes.
Mr. Bailey's not here. Mr. Schwartz?
No.
Mr. Badke?
Yes.
And I vote yes. So the motion carries 5-3. All right.
Congratulations.
Well,
Thank you.
thank you. And good luck. We'll wait in anticipation. All right. Onward.
Just the first day.
Let's see.
You know, I just think Breck's soft-spoken, but boy, all of you are, sort of. I know, you're right. I will laugh too about playing on that old turf. God, that was the worst. You know, after a game, you didn't have any skin left on you. I don't know. I don't know why it was like more like a carpet on a concrete. So, there we go. The days of glory. I will ask that, I have to sometimes go back and listen to the meeting and catch things, and it really, when a motion's being made, like this, and it's, you know, Molly and I are there reading lips going, I think that's what. So please, please try to, you know, use the mic generously. No, you were good. You were good. You were good. It's,
Not a mumbler.
All right.
Everyone's accused of that.
Next item on the agenda is the certificate of appropriateness application for 122 East Main Street, the rehabilitation and preservation of ghost signage.
This is the highlight of the evening. I think I haven't had many projects that come to the BAR. It's really been as interesting and generated as much discussion as this one. So it's I know Mr. Kaplan wanted to create a buzz. I think he has, and in a good way. So what's before you is it's a COA request for 122 East Main Street. This is on the downtown mall, and this is the eastern wall that faces 2nd Street south of the mall. And the request is to rehabilitate the existing vestige signs on the east elevation. And I want to be clear about using the term rehabilitation, not restoration, not recreation. And the preservation is that once the rehabilitation is done, we're able to sort of keep, protect that so that it doesn't fade as much as it might otherwise. We did briefly discuss this in May. Michael discussed some other things that are going on in the mall. But to this building, it was constructed in 1897, and it's actually looking from the mall, it's the 2 storefronts, 120 and 122, 122 being the farthest east and the current location of the Oyster House. Let me find my note. We had, we know that in that eastern building, that from 1897 to 1912, the business located here was T.J. Willis and Company, and the sign closest to the northeast corner says T.J. Willis and Company Grocers and Hay Mill. That sign is still visible. From 1912 to around sometime 1945, 1946, the 122 was occupied by Pence and Sterling, which is a drugstore, or was a drugstore. There is and again, I'm talking at the northeast corner, you can see Pence and Sterling still in red paint over top of the T.J. Willis sign. We know that from 1947 into the 1960s, a series of businesses were there. One, the record shop. There was a dentist. For a time was the Griddle Cafeteria. Saunders Home Appliances, Fleming's Men's Shop, and Glassner's Jewelers for a period of time. I can't really make out any signage I can associate directly with those, but there are, for example, the top of the wall looks like the words BRID. We don't know if that's bridal. You can make out the word cake, and there's other signs in there, and this is on the right-hand side. And the reason I'm going through this is just to offer that there's a lot going on that northeast corner, from the original business in 1897 and likely into the 1960s. The building at 120 East Main, that the other storefront, was occupied from 1909 to into the 1950s by Hawkins Brothers and Company, and I haven't seen anything that indicates signage from them. Also, then in the middle section, you have there are actually 3 Coke signs there, 2 at the top and 1 at the bottom. The 2 less visible are much larger than the one at the top. Then the second Coca-Cola sign was added, and a signage below for Owl Cigars, OWL. And then to the far left was the Sloan's liniment sign. That appears to be the only thing that's on that segment. So what's before you is a this had started out as an idea to maybe restore the Coke sign, and it's expanded into a discussion about the wall itself, if possible. I will admit that last summer I told Mike, please don't do this because it'll put the BAR in a tough spot. And then sort of talking folks in the preservation world, it was sort of interesting take on it in the sense that we're losing this sign. Can this stabilize it, at least be held on to, what's there? But then I had a series of conversations last week with just people passing by and some folks that I talked to about this. And it's really interesting. I know I mentioned to you all, you stand there at that wall, you start to see things pop out. And Molly even did some things with Photoshop to try and see what can we see. There's a lot going on. And so the hesitation you might, read in the staff report is more my saying, before we touch it, let's really make sure, bless you, let's make sure we know what we're touching, what we're bringing forward. Let's document that. Let's be sure that any vestige that we're rehabilitating is a correct interpretation of that wall. So I think, and in that sort of introduction, I know I talked more about the wall than what's being done, but the methodology that's proposed, that's what is done. That seems to be the appropriate way to do it, and that is to sort of seal the wall where it is, and then really draw out with sort of incremental application of tint to bring the sign, to rehabilitate it, and it's sort of to touch it as lightly as possible, to bring it to visibility, and then stop there. And so the questions, and I hopefully have articulated them well in here, are, I think the methodology is sound, but again, it's a question for the BAR. This is putting a coating on a wall. We typically don't allow the painting of unpainted brick. That may not necessarily apply here because that brick has been painted. I think the question is, should this entire wall be done like this? And what should we know? What should be considered? What should be made available before that's done? And if you all are to consider this, how can we make a determination of when we've gotten to rehabilitation, when the artist is working there? Is it our job to say, nope, you're good, stop? I'm not sure how to answer that one. The artist could say, I'm going to bring this thing back, 99%. If we have some strong feelings about, at what point do we want to evaluate it as it goes, that's something for the conversation. So a lot going on in that. Like I said, hopefully I've expressed my questions in the staff report in a way that can generate the discussion. And do you have any questions for me? And we have lots and lots of photos of the wall, so I don't have to have a Jeff spreadsheet up there on the wall. If whatever, you want to look at something, let us know. And Mr. Kaplan is here, very enthused about this project, so I will yield to him.
Mr. Kaplan?
Thank you very much. And I owe a great debt of gratitude to Jeff, who has worked very hard on this. This report is very comprehensive and balanced, and thank you, sir. We ask your approval to rehabilitate this historic mural, this vintage mural, to clean and seal the entire wall, to document the existing conditions with photographs, to assemble historic photos that confirm the original style of each mural, to rehabilitate all the ghost murals on the wall, all of them. Rehabilitate each one just enough to achieve legibility, so that each mural can tell its story of the history of downtown. To rehabilitate in a delicate and skilled manner to preserve the vintage qualities that are part of its magic. The artist we found is an expert. This is what he does, and he has positive reviews everywhere he's worked. The final results will be exactly as represented in the computer image that you approve. And the final results will in no way diminish or compromise any nearby structures. And the final results will be compatible and consistent with the downtown historic character and ambiance. We believe that there's actually a responsibility to preserve these unique and fragile historic assets. They are vintage public art. They provide a window into yesterday, who we were, how we lived, and how our downtown looked over the past 100 years. The murals complement the historic character of downtown because they are genuine historic memorabilia. They amplify the authenticity of our historic district. And they make people stop and smile and think about the passing of time and marvel that a soda pop ever cost 5 cents. The murals also increase the urban vitality and the allure of our downtown. Rehabbing the legibility will make the Second Street stroll all the more interesting and fun. And as Jeff said already, people are stopping to contemplate and discuss the very charming puzzle that all these different names compile. Fading is not the inevitable trajectory of a wall mural. A wall mural fades only if that's allowed to happen due to lack of concern or funds. We have a building owner who wants to rehabilitate their wall and preserve a fragile historic asset. We have an expert who's available to assure the authenticity and respect for the historic district. And the mural rehabilitation makes a valuable contribution to our downtown and its economic vitality. So please grant us permission to save these before they're lost.
Thank you very much.
Any questions?
I'm sure we'll have questions. Let me see. First, open that up for any questions from the public that are either here in the.
Also, is this a time for me to defer to my colleague from Charlottesville?
Sure. If there's some
Albemarle
additional portion of the presentation, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
That would be a good time.
More of a public comment, I guess, but my name's Tom Chapman. I'm the executive director of the Albemarle Charlottesville Historical Society, located 202nd Street Northeast. Been in the position for about over 3 years and have been very interested in the work that Friends of Charlottesville Downtown have been doing to rejuvenate and reimagine how we think about the downtown area. Their work to build community connected to place is important, and it ties directly with what we at the Historical Society are trying to do, to shed light on our whole history. And all this history starts at the local level, and how we tell these stories come in many various shapes and sizes and forms, such as a mural like this. So the Albemarle Charlottesville Historical Society supports the Friends' proposal to rehabilitate and preserve this mural at 122 East Main Street. Rehabilitating it will bring it to life, a past history of the downtown Charlottesville that's fading away that we want to bring back, and also preserve it for future generations. The contractor, Brush Can, who will conduct the rehabilitation, has a wealth of experience, and their work has been noted by the National Trust for Historic Preservation. During my time working at Montpelier, which is a National Trust for Historic Preservation property, I know that the Trust's approval of anything does not come lightly or easily. So if they like Brush Can, then I can only imagine that they're a good company. So this is an important consideration. So in conclusion, the Historical Society supports Michael Kaplan in this proposal and what the Friends want to do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any comment from, or first questions for the applicant from the public here or online? Questions from the board?
I got a question, and I think it's probably you don't know quite yet, but I think I'm right in that maybe your archival research will help. But is the intent to restore these such that the latest sign is the furthest out, I guess, like in terms of a layered approach, right? Because obviously these are layered on top of each other. So is the most recent sign going to look the most prominent, and the oldest look the most further back and covered up, I guess?
Yeah, the artist Scott Allred from Brush Can says he gets up on the lift and he stares at what's there for him to find. And he says he stares at it for a couple of days before he even starts, because, as Jeff says, the longer you look at it, the more you discover.
Right.
And the idea is to lift up what's there slightly. And to your point, that which is older is probably fainter already. Okay. And the idea is not to make them all equal, but to maintain their relative status, but to boost the legibility at each status.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question, just a clarification, really. The note here says rehab of Coca-Cola sign is the primary project, rehab of additional portions of the wall, TBD. And in your spoken comments just now, you said that that's not TBD, that we are doing So you are planning on doing the entire mural, is that correct?
Yes, at the time we first approached everybody, we mistakenly thought that less would be easier for you to say yes to. But as everybody discussed it, it became apparent that it actually undid the whole purpose if you do just one piece. It's about the whole wall and everybody given their chronological due. And so now, with whatever protocol is necessary, we're asking for permission to do the whole wall.
Yeah, and I just, that was, because there had been some, like, hoping to, but I think just to memorialize that we are talking about the entire wall. So there's nothing odd about my question. I just really just wanted the exchange that just occurred, so.
I have a technical question, Mr. Kaplan. Could you explain a little bit more about, you mentioned that there's a cleaning process and then a sealant is applied, and then is the painting then done on the outside of the sealant?
Yeah, the sealant, which is porous, prevents what's under it from deteriorating further.
Uh-huh.
So it's a clear polyurethane that still lets the whole thing breathe, and then the new paint goes right on top of that.
And is it possible that with the application of the urethane, that brings color forward in a way that makes it more legible in and of itself?
I would guess that you're probably right. I don't really know, but Scott's attack is like hour by hour to just get where everybody wants to go.
Yeah.
And if that seal alone does it, then he won't need to touch a spot, that spot.
Mm-hmm. Right. Thank you.
How does he, or how does one sort of anticipate what how the sealer is going to enhance the wall or change the wall? Like, so, like, how much would we just in a location where there isn't any signage, and they apply the sealer, a 6x6 square? How different would that appear than the rest of the wall? You know,
I actually have no idea.
Yeah.
I'm told that it's porous and that it's light and color neutral.
Mm-hmm.
So my home experience would suggest that it'll darken something if you put this on it, but apparently it dries as a clear seal.
Yeah.
But I'll get you a follow-up on that.
Yeah, I'd be interested in understanding.
But
what the
each
options-
part of that whole chemical process is part of what he's doing to get us to this look.
Yeah.
So if the sealer itself helps do that, then less additional is going to need to be applied.
I can fill in. You may know I own a stud built in 1826, Thomas Jefferson design, and brick deteriorates. And so if you don't stop that, and you probably see lots of old walls who just got worse and worse and worse, to get holes in it, and that protects it and brings back the old color from the brick. And we have done it at Stoutville, and it's a historic landmark, and it actually will improve it for when you go close right now, it looks really deteriorated. That's pretty bad. And I think it will come more alive and protect the brick for a long time. So I think that has two purposes.
Thank you.
So the urethane's going on first, and then they're gonna paint over that?
Is a urethane created for this purpose.
Yeah.
And then there's a final coat that goes over top of everything when it's finished, which is UV repellent and further stabilizing the work.
I'd be interested to see what that original coat is, because my understanding, that stuff brings out a lot of color. And I think you also need to recognize what that's gonna do with lights and lighting and how that's gonna really affect it, because that's a shine on that. Especially if you're gonna do another coat at the end there. So I think there's a lot of different factors there as far as, nighttime lighting and how that's all gonna look, and even if you're gonna be able to, the reflection on that is pretty significant. I'd also, when it comes to the artist, I mean, those guys are all, unbelievably talented, but you gotta make sure, and I worry about the creativity there, because there shouldn't be any. What is on what is on that paper, he needs to, you know, whoever, the creativity's got to go out the back door, and they're a worker bee.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? With unbelievable talent.
No, you're absolutely right.
But
And
I think that's really important to put that out there, that we're not looking for creativity. This is what we want.
yeah, after the meeting
what
with
you
y'all
have.
last month, when I reported back to him, that first of all, the discussion is about the whole wall. He got all excited because he felt that everybody was humming the same tune now, because to him, the artistry is to be able to give each ghost its due, not to soup it up to his taste, but what it is, not to change it. And I will get, he told me that the finish is matte, but I will get you a
Yeah.
more comprehensive response to what you just said.
I would wonder if that's a high gloss or not, because I think that's a significant
Yeah.
difference, like I said, with that lighting. And then my other comment is, bringing all this stuff out, are you gonna lose it? You know, like, I guess I really need to see what this computer-generated picture looks like more, I guess. Yeah, because I just worry about all those different things coming out, and then you're losing things in the process. So bringing more out actually loses it. Yeah.
So he's bringing out what's there. He's not adding to what's there. And so it is a puzzle. When you give them all their due, it becomes a puzzle. But it also becomes a piece of art in and of that fact. And so what you're staring at now, there's actually more that you can't see in this photo, that you have to stand there and let your eyes
Yeah.
adjust, and you suddenly start seeing that right above the W, there's a whole lot of story up there.
Yeah.
And perhaps this first coast of seal will bring some of that out. And his goal is just to give us back the wall that we have, not to get cute, not to say, don't you think you ought to introduce a little purple? You know, there's, as you say, it's not a place for artistry, it's a place for authenticity.
No, and I just want to go on record as far as the business owner or building owner wanting to make improvements. Thank you
Right.
for doing. You know, I think any improvement to downtown is wonderful and appreciative.
Any other questions?
I just have one other question. So the last time you were in here, you were talking about how he's got the ability the artist has the ability to enhance and sort of bring some things out and modulate, you know,
Yeah.
how what the final expression of the sign is. So given that sort of ability to sort of play with the different impressions and how illuminated some are and how recessed some others are, who's the final arbiter of that?
Yeah, and some of what you just described, he says he cannot do until he's up on the lift, right? And actually sees it eyeball to eyeball. So at that point, he will generate a computer image of where he thinks we can go with this. And with your approval, we could take it back to Jeff and even to you if you said, is this what we're talking about? And everyone says, yeah, that's what we're talking about. And then because it's such a gradual process that it's not going to run away from us.
So it'll come back to Jeff?
Well, that's for you to say.
I can
Do
hardly
you want that
see.
on you?
You know, I'll just offer, and if you could go to one of the photos of the one I took. So, and I think it is exactly where the questions are lying, sort of like, okay, we're understanding what's going to be done, but it's that calibration of what's acceptable. And there's, for example, the owl cigar. The owl is gone. It looks like the brick was replaced or something was done there. And so, you know, sometimes it's where we see things that aren't there, or maybe, you know, and I know the artist had done some research on the older signs. So it is saying, you know, if it's not there, it doesn't get added. And so and I know in the image, he was trying to just work with what, the old historic signs were, just trying to express what it could look like. It's not what he's presenting as his final. So that's if you all were inclined to this, is there a graphic that you would like to see? Are there images? Are there assurances of what's there? Did he lock you out? Or wait, you want me to share mine?
Jeff, can I understand the difference between the image that's on page 64 and the image that's very similar, but there are some differences on page 65? I'm just curious which one is, maybe one's from the city and one's from the applicant?
See if this comes up. So the 64, what's the?
Or maybe that was the previous meeting? I'm not sure what the two, there's one dated May 18th and one's dated June 23.
Okay, so, and there's.
Right, you can really see the Coca-Cola there
When
a lot
we
more than here.
first talked, Mike and I first talked, or I guess, there's an earlier image, and then a week or two ago, you had a better image
Yeah.
from the artist.
When you all said you wanted to talk about the whole wall, he submitted a fresh image that better reflected that, because the earlier image was a smaller area.
And I dated them because they're slightly different, but I included them because it does sort of illustrate that, sorry, I'm not speaking in the mic, right? It also shows the sort of, the difference in interpretation of, the difficulty in reading it. But, this, I don't know, just here's, a good example. I don't know, you can't really see it, but like the word, up here's the word cake. There's something right there. It says low, looks like prices. And above that is, up here, you can see BRID. So this is where, and I didn't see that until Friday, standing out there looking at it. And I swear, and I just need to ask you all, I swear this looks like a moose head right here. Did you see, and Molly looked at me like I'm nuts, but yeah, you can see CAKE here, but I see a moose head. But the image that I was just going to show, here. So you can see in the owl cigar, you can see the bottom here, RAGIC, and there's where the owl image was. I don't know if that owl is still there, or if it's if the artist in their initial research said, oh, there would have been an owl there. So that's the kind of thing that, again, if you all are inclined to approve it, it would be helpful to give some thought to with
So
what
we're-
certainty can we approve, know what we're getting.
Sorry. So are we approving or considering a version that recreates an owl?
I don't know. I would.
I think we have to start by putting on the seal and see what reveals itself. And if there is a ghost there, then he would factor that into his computer drawing that then goes to Jeff that says, this is the owl we see. In the example here, as Jeff said, where the owl appears in the photograph is based on the owl cigar mural wherever you find it in the country. Right. That's their mural. And so he said it would be here. And that's one of the decisions that communities make. Some go back to 100%, full saturation, exactly the way it looked on the day it was installed 100 years ago. And that's just a value choice. It seems to be the consensus among all of us that would be longer downtown Charlottesville. The idea here is to preserve the sort of the karma of the historic vintage.
What I might suggest for our purposes is that tonight we consider the process that they've put forward, which obviously requires a little bit more research and a final product. That we could, we could choose whether to approve that or not, and that we continue to work with the applicant approval of a final art direction at a later date if the process is approved. Are there other specific questions for the applicant? Should we move to comment? Are there any comments from the public, either here in the room? Yes? Just please state your name and speak into the microphone.
My name is Susan Krischel, and I live on the downtown mall. And I think I would be foolish to try and think that I could do a better job of arguing the historical significance than the Historical Society. So I'm going to skip that piece of it for the moment and just say that this corridor is the most important entry onto the downtown mall, given its proximity to the Water Street parking garage and to the outdoor parking lots. And right now, when you walk up that corridor, you see an unfinished hotel on one side and a dilapidated and run-down large wall on the other side. Hopefully one day before I die, the Dewberry Hotel will get finished, but I'm not hopeful for that. But I am excited about the idea that we can bring some life and some excitement to this important entry corridor. And I think this is a really interesting and cool way to do it that does pay homage to our historical background here, but also celebrates artists. And I think that's also an important consideration in this discussion.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other comment from the public? Anyone online, Rami? No? Okay, comments from the board.
I would just say that what you suggested about approving the process makes a lot of sense to me. And yeah, the idea that it's, you know, if something's not there, they're not gonna try and restore it. So yeah, it does look like a window got filled in where there may have been an owl at some point. Yeah, I think it's, I mean, we've got a lot of vestige signs in this town, and this would be a really great way to find out, is this it'd be a good test case. And I think it's, it would be perfectly, the process they've described would be perfectly acceptable to use as a test case.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I don't know how we sort of codify being able to look at it in process, but if there were a way that we can have some input, I would be interested in going down that road.
Yeah, I think just simply that might be, I don't want to say enough, but that you're not saying that's fine, go do it, let the artist, let the architect build a building. You're expressing that you want to be involved in this and have updates and follow it. And I think we'll have to work that out a little bit. I don't think the guy's going to come in and knock this out in a weekend, but that we that there are periodic pauses that allow Michael and I to communicate. And if so, to me, first and foremost, and if you don't mind, I'll use this as my public service announcement. Molly's been saying, we need to put the word out to the city and ask people, do you have photographs of downtown? And it might be a family photo, and this is in the background, but, encourage people, if they've got photographs, share them with us so that, we can, see a little bit further back in time what was there. But to me, I think Michael's done a really good job explaining the process and that incremental steps. So I have a much better image in my head of what the artist would be doing. It's the first step, though, would be, I think I'd have to say to him, if I don't see an owl there, you're not painting an owl there. And if there is a moose head there, then there better be a moose head there. So I think if you can express in that I will be tracking this project incrementally, checking in with you all. Hopefully you all are walking by, and I could live with that. I can live with that responsibility.
So a question for the applicant. How quickly would this artist get started on this? Like, would it be in a couple of months? And
No,
or is it?
There's been a dance going on of me keeping him available while you all were deciding, while the patron was deciding with the money, and he is currently freezing the last 2 weeks of August for us. He will move here and stay for 2 weeks to do this job. And so that's the target window we're working on. We hope to, if you were to give us a green light and work on all that time with Jeff, it would be done on or about September 5.
The whole thing?
It's all he's gonna do all day for 10 to 14 straight days.
And if the project were approved this evening, my understanding is this research phase would happen, and that there would be an additional kind of, I don't know what we call it, guiding document or guiding image, communicative image
I think
before he
that's-
starts.
I think that's a good way. He is waiting for you to quarterback it. The second photo that Jeff was talking to was based on what I reported to him after our last meeting, that they want to see the whole wall. And so we'll just keep massaging that as all through the way, until the first dab of paint goes on. We'll probably be tuning it in to where Jeff and whoever among you is also engaged says, that's it.
Right.
And then he'll pick up his paint.
Okay. This is such a unique case. I would almost think that we should appoint a small group, working group to work closely rather than using our meetings to follow this process. I just don't think it will happen on our timeline.
Yeah, it seems like it's gonna have to happen more regularly than just once a month, if we have 2 months left.
Other comments?
Yeah, I mean, I'm in support of this project. I think it's a fantastic idea. I think, something I kind of tried to take a step back from this and think about, we've approved, or the BAR has approved new murals on buildings in historic districts. And let's say that building then gets sold to somebody 2 years after we approve that mural. And then that new owner wants to, maintain that mural, right? Are they not allowed to? Are they not allowed to keep that mural just like it is and repaint it the same colors? I don't think we could say no to that. It's maintenance to some degree. I think the tricky part here is that it's just really old and nobody's been maintaining it. And you've got lots of layers. And so in a sense, I think staff's recommendation is to look at this as preservation and rehabilitation. And so therefore, we're looking through it through that lens. If they had said, let's look at it through a restoration or reconstruction lens, we could do that. It would give us a different set of guidelines to follow. And so I think part of the conversation is like, which lens do we look at it through? I think that based on what the applicant wants to do, we're looking at it through the rehabilitation and preservation lens. And so that's helping guide this conversation as it should. And so I think the things that have been said so far, as much as I'd love to see that owl on the wall, if it's not there, we shouldn't put it back. But I think that the process they're proposing makes sense. I think showing the layers of the different signs makes sense. It's going to give the wall a lot of depth and a lot of vitality. So, I was actually this morning looking through Ed Roseberry's photograph book, and there's some images of downtown, and it's like every building's got a painted sign. It's pretty amazing. So I think this could also potentially, encourage future projects like this, which would just add to the, kind of layered value of the history of Charlottesville.
Well, I came here tonight really on the fence about this, really conflicted. And mainly because this is such a cool part of downtown Charlottesville. I just wouldn't want to be part of messing it up. And it's, just touching it is even, is a question of whether you mess it up. I have to say that the way that you guys have
I think that's a phone.
It's Ludwig's.
Please keep the cat calls from the audience.
I know, Ludwig.
To a minimum. I really appreciate the way that you guys have approached this and the expertise that you've brought to this project, the care. It's clear that you are doing this with the same approach, that you don't want to mess this up. You actually want to bring it forward. It's an unusual situation. Maybe it's not unusual. It may be unusual for a restoration to tackle this many layered signs at one time. I could imagine that it will be, if it moves forward, would set a lot of, it would be a subject of conversation, probably pro and con about preservation of this signage. But to me, the restoration of the Coke sign was less interesting because of just how many of those signs there are across the country, that it wasn't particular to our town. But the approach to the whole wall and a very careful attention to the layered quality, I think has the potential of saying a lot, of pulling forward local businesses that were present in those locations, and the very layered nature of it, speaking about the changes of usage over time. And frankly, it brings forward a part of Charlottesville that was pre-20s and 30s, when a very different kind of approach to architecture really took over downtown, and it's interesting to see this portion of Charlottesville come back to life in some way. So I came in on the fence. I'm feeling in support of this project, given the way that you've approached it and the care that you've brought to this. So thank you.
I want to say that I've walked past this wall many a time, and it's never really felt more than just a brick wall. And when I first heard about like the concept of trying to rehabilitate it to a certain degree but not fully restore it, something about that felt kind of false, or like it wasn't either it was going to continue to naturally fade, or it was going to need to be fully restored. That something about trying to do it halfway felt, I was skeptical of it. But then seeing the previous work that the artist did in the Mooresville, North Carolina, helped kind of tell the tale that it can be done in the right way. Something about this felt different. I really like the mural further up West Main Street, on what's the public oyster building now. But it's a little different because it's an art mural, it's not an ad, and the previous mural is still there, and then a new mural went over top, and you get both the layers on top. This one felt different because it is an ad, and it's not, I guess you can debate what is an ad, what is a sign, what is art, what is a mural, but seeing how it's been successful in other cities, I do think it would help bring more life to that wall, and I've slowly come around that the rehabilitation process and slowly bringing it out can be a positive in this application.
I just want to thank everybody here just for bringing this. I think your excitement is really commendable. It just shows a love of your community and your willingness to kind of step out and make this happen. I think is just something more, that's good thing to, good thing to have, and hopefully it'll be infectious to another point, which is how these kinds of things might grow and maybe get a new hotel built, or
we're going to get that hotel built.
Yeah. I think you made a really compelling, everybody made very compelling points, which does nothing but help this. I think what came out of the meeting tonight was that procedurally, we still want to maintain a process. I think this needs to be handled carefully, just so that it doesn't, so that we get it right. I think this is the first really good step. But I think what'll make it successful is following through with it, having, as many check-ins as we can. I was actually surprised to hear that it was only going to take 2 weeks. I was expecting longer. These kinds of things, I feel like they're successful when somebody gets into it. We could talk about it for so long, and we can look at imagery, but at a certain point, it's a craft, and it's something. The magic happens in the construction or in the artwork. I think it's just making sure that there's a hands-on approach where it's not just one person given rein, and that that we have a periodic check-in. And I also think it might be a good idea, all of a sudden tonight there were certain rules that were being set down. Like, for instance, if the thing is not there, don't and reimagine it. But I think that we'll probably find or generate more rules as we move forward, and it'll get more technical and detailed as we move along, whether it's with the sealer or with some kind of material or with some kind of paint. We may discover things as he starts, in August, and I think it might be a good idea to codify that in some way, so we have a sort of a record of kind of a law book of what we're trying to attain, and rules to guidelines and rules to go by. So, but I want to thank you very much for bringing
Thank you,
this.
sir.
Yep.
Further comment, or would someone like to take a stab at a motion?
I did have a comment. I wanted to thank Friends of Charlottesville Downtown for bringing this forward. It's really exciting, and what's exciting, sorry, my mic was not on. What's exciting about this is that it's not just a Coca-Cola sign, which was the original project, but the rest of the murals tell a history about the building, which is amazing. These are not just murals, commercial signs, advertisement from the past. TJ Will's, once that's restored, tells a story of a grocery store that was here 100 years ago, and that's really important. So I'm very supportive of this. If I can find where the written motion is in our materials, I'm happy to make it, or somebody else can grab the opportunity while I'm.
So if I could, I think there's a question about that sheen and so I think that I think as the process that's laid out in that spreadsheet, and there's the initial research, and they're going to be doing that research to tell us at least what they can identify before they get up and do things. So I think that referring to that sort of and that that archival information will be provided prior to starting, something like that, so that we know it's been looked at, it's been photographed. I think you all have asked for some clarification on or Kevin has, but I think it was an excellent question about the sheen. We'll go through this and then find out, gee, you can only see it at 8 in the morning. So I think you can find out what was the experience in North Carolina and other places. Does it remain visible? And I think the phrase that keeps coming to my mind is when do we say that's far enough? You stop. Like, to me personally, I think that the red and the green of the Coke sign's probably been pulled a little more forward than what's there, but it would be, I think, in the period of that 2 weeks, it's going to take some collaboration, cooperation, but that staff would be, staying on top of this and consulting with the BAR chair and co-chair if any questions. And that would be sort of that. So there's the things that we would want to resolve prior to work starting, and then it's that that process during the work. And I'm consulting with the BAR chair, co-chair, and with the understanding that we can make a determination of, okay, that's far enough, or that it doesn't become a restoration or recreation.
Want me to give it a try? You got it?
Whatever. Go ahead.
Okay, I wasn't sure. Okay. Having considered the standards set forth in the city code, including the ADC district design guidelines, I move to find the proposed rehabilitation preservation of the vestige signs at 122 East Main Street satisfies the BR's criteria, is compatible with this property and other properties in the ADC district, and the BR approves the application with the following conditions. That the wall will be fully documented, and there'll be archival research done on it before any work is started. That The applicant will confirm the sheen of any coatings on the brick, and whether there will be any color change to the brick with our application. That we are approving the process and not necessarily the images that have been presented to us, and that the artist will maintain the hierarchy of the various layers in the signs, or the various, that they will not recreate anything that does not already exist, and that during the application process, the applicant will work with staff, who will also work with the chair and vice chair of the BAR to review the process and confirm that it is progressing in the way that we feel is appropriate.
Second. I think he beat me by a sliver of a second. But I wondered if I could offer a friendly amendment. There were some other conditions in the staff report that, and I don't know if this has been satisfied yet. It seems like it has been, but there be any further research on original signage done. That was one of the, and that a thorough image and photo analysis of the current condition of the wall be done, photographs be done to preserve what's currently there before anything is touched up. And any repairs to the masonry have to follow ADC guidelines for repairing that.
I tried to get the first two, but I think you made it much clearer.
I was just
but I
following the
accept those
language that
amendments.
Jeff suggested. It was being pretty
Was it in, I
spare.
couldn't find that.
It was elsewhere. It was above in the report.
He prints this out for us. I didn't even bother yet. Anyways,
Anyway.
I accept those amendments.
All right, any further discussion? We'll call the vote.
I'll say something very
Sure.
funny about the discussion. I wouldn't mind seeing the owl reappear magically, magical owl. Sorry, I know Kevin Badke's going to be offended because I'm creating something false historicism, but but there's
We'll
really.
find it. He's down there somewhere.
I'm going to go looking for him tonight.
I think that's where you get into the
I know.
difference between
I understand.
rehabilitation and restoration.
And art.
Yeah.
But I would say by way of analogy, if we had a historic building and it were somehow by lightning tonight destroyed, will we allow that building to be built just as it were? And I would argue it's sort of the same thing for the owl. He's just disappeared, not of his own will. Somebody decided to put a door in there. Bring back the owl.
I just don't want an artist to go rogue on us, that's all. That's all I was worried about. Sometimes they can do that.
Put invisible glow-in-the-dark paint, so just.
I'm gonna go out with neon paint just to annoy
Neon and
Kevin
phosphorescent
Badke.
paint specifically against our guidelines.
I think we need to stop over ahead.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, Mr. Timmerman,
Aye.
Mr. Burrell,
Aye.
Mr. Zemer,
Aye.
Ms. Lewis.
Aye.
Mr. Whitney,
Aye.
Mr. Schwartz,
Yes.
Mr. Badke,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Thank you for bringing this to us.
Thanks a lot.
We look forward to working with you.
You'll be out there with a tin can.
All right. All right. Next item on our agenda is the, it's a couple of things. It's the related to 207 to 211 Ridge Street.
So let me introduce both of them. Once, there are two items related to the Salvation Army at 207, 211 Ridge Street. One being the requiring action on your part is a special use permit request, and the other is a preliminary discussion about the proposed design, and which no action is required for that. So, and thank you for that. was exactly kind of what I was hoping for on that sign question. I wasn't sure where you all would be, but that very illuminating. All right, so again, the SUP request for 207, 211 Ridge Street. This is their existing buildings at the site. You all have approved the demolition. Their 1965, 1980, and a 1992 structure. So that's taken care of. What is before you is a special use permit, which are approved by City Council. So you are not approving or denying. You are merely making a recommendation to Council for them to consider on whether or not the requested special conditions, if allowed, would be detrimental to the Ridge Street ADC district. And there are a couple things. They are part of the request also involves uses, but you all, the BAR does not, you don't evaluate how a site is used. So that is specifically omitted from this, just so there's no confusion. But the primary question is the modified setbacks, and Aaron does a better job of explaining, but there's a build-to line associated with the setback requirement and of how much of the face of a structure must be at that setback line. As I had mentioned earlier, that this is in the West Main zoning, kind of wrap that corner, and that's what's requiring this being fully pulled to the front of the property. I will say I've been wondering for a year now what that is, and it is in the building. So, but I know, but I always thought there was a train or thunder or something. So just figured you all would wonder as well. So, but this structure or this property has two street frontages, so that causes some problem with the ordinance. So what they've are requesting with the modification is that the setback at 4th Street at the rear, this building will be pulled forward towards Ridge Street. So there's the change from the 4th Street, and then at Ridge Street that in lieu of where you'd have to fill the whole front, they're allowing that articulation of the wall, which is where that large tree is that was that we're working to preserve there. So, and then the other, and also the setbacks would allow some mobility in and out of the site during construction. And one of the things they want to do too is the shelter will remain in operation. So pulling the construction towards Ridge Street allows the shelter facility to the rear of the site to be in continued use during the project. And then the parking requirements, they won't have as much parking as required, but also there's a point at which the scale is tipped and you have to build structured parking. So the modification would not require all of the max parking, but still also not require that they construct a parking garage, a structured parking on the site. And then after, again, your evaluation of that, consideration of those things, you're not looking at the architecture of the building yet. Will the modifications of the setbacks and the parking have an adverse impact on the historic district? The staff doesn't believe it will. Again, also with the understanding that this comes back to you for design review anyway. And then in the preliminary discussion, they are, Aaron said, this somewhat far along in the design. So we're looking at, not conceptual. This is kind of solidly the direction they're heading. So what questions would you all have? What information would you want to see in the final presentation, or any issues with the materiality, et cetera, et cetera? That's what you want to do in a preliminary discussion, really working towards what would we want from the applicant so that they could have a successful submittal. So with that, I will hand it off to you all. Aaron can discuss it, but again, the first thing is taking action on the SUP, and then after that, have that preliminary discussion about the design.
It's all yours.
Thanks, Jeff. You do a fine job. I'm Erin Hannigan with Mitchell Matthews Architects, and with me tonight is John Matthews, who might chime in with page numbers or other tidbits. So it's over here. The Salvation Army has been serving Charlottesville since 1912. They've occupied the site at 207 Ridge Street since around 1965, when they constructed the chapel, the administration offices, and the gymnasium. Around 1980, they built the emergency shelter at 211 Ridge, which is on the 4th Street side of the site at the rear. And then around 1992, they added the transitional housing piece in the soup kitchen, which is embedded in the center of the site. The Salvation Army is the only year-round shelter available in Charlottesville. Last year, they helped more than 21,000 individuals and families with critical social services. I'm going to read from the Salvation Army's goals, which says their goal is to have each person they serve, which is their client, partner with the Salvation Army in the Pathway of Hope program. Our plan, meaning their plan, is to assist in breaking the cycle of poverty and assist individuals and families to achieve their goals through securing stable jobs, housing, and becoming self-sufficient. The single most important reason for redevelopment is to improve community services and increase capacity. The men's shelter is constantly full. In addition, the current facilities are in 3 buildings, and therefore the programs they house are disconnected due to the piecemeal expansion that occurred over time and constricted the nature of the constricted nature of the existing parcel. The building goals of the new facility include increased capacity, improved functionality and efficiency, allowance for future expansion on site, and most importantly, allowing the existing shelter to remain operational during redevelopment. The Salvation Army would also like the community at large to see and become more aware of their services and the work that they do with this new facility, and will provide to the community, and hopefully become more engaged with the facility and the volunteer opportunities within. Therefore, the building is sited closer to Ridge Street, creating that visibility into the building on the primary street as a physical manifestation of the goal. The design team also wished to save the existing 56-inch oak tree, which we discussed in the January meeting. Why are we requesting this SUP? We're requesting it for use, but that's not under your purview. So the site is a double frontage lot with Ridge Street as a primary street and 4th Street Southwest as a linking street. The lot is 397 feet deep from Ridge Street to 4th Street and just under 120 feet wide. That at its narrowest point, which is the majority of the length of the site. SUP is, again, being sought for the use, which is a shelter care facility. It's also a house of worship, which is a by right use, but is also requesting these other modifications that I can go into slightly more detail. The setback relief on the linking street, which is 4th Street, the required setback is a 5-foot minimum and a 12-foot maximum. We're proposing a 10-foot minimum be written into the SUP request, and that there's no maximum setback. And the reason, again, constructability, with the existing shelter to remain intact during construction, the only available open area for laydown space to redevelop is along that 4th Street frontage. The project goals are utilize the allowable height available under the existing ordinance and leave undeveloped area open for future expansion. This means that the project is pushed towards Ridge Street, leaving the open area on the 4th Street frontage. And modifying the min to 10 feet rather than a 5-foot minimum aligns with a street buffer requirement of 10 feet as well, which would remain during any future expansion. No maximum allows for the currently proposed structure as designed to be built as represented here. The second item is reducing the build-to percentages. So the required percentage that has to fall of the building frontage that needs to fall within the min-max setbacks on Ridge Street is 80%, and it's 40% on the 4th Street side. We're proposing 32% at Ridge Street, and we're asking it for not to be required on the 4th Street side. Again, the reason we're doing this on Ridge Street is to protect that tree, which we all agreed we wanted to save. And the reason we're doing it at 4th Street is, again, because the existing shelter occupies a good bit of, a portion of the frontage. The rest of it's the open area that I just discussed. The next item is the reduction of the required parking quantity. Using the ordinance, we would be required to have 52 spaces. We're asking for no minimum so that we can allow for future flexibility on site, which aligns with the proposed zoning ordinance, but the actual spaces to be provided would be 32, which is a 39% reduction. We're also asking for the modification to the required covered parking. It's just covered parking, not particularly structured parking, but if you have more than 20 spaces on site, 50% of those are required to be covered. And in this case, for the clientele visiting the building, open surface parking would just be viewed as more comfortable and favorable to them. It also allows the parking lot to be used for other outdoor uses should they have an event happen on site. Going into the massing and scale, which is in your purview, the 1.5-story chapel is the portion that reaches out towards Ridge Street and is similarly scaled to the 1- and 2-story houses across Ridge Street. Similarly, the 1-story multi-purpose room stretches towards 4th Street southwest, but is over 100 feet from the property line and is also therefore in keeping with the existing 1- and 2-story houses in scale and size on the 4th Street side. Both the chapel and the multi-purpose rooms are narrow forms, reminiscent of the width of the existing single-family residential fabric that remains in the area. And the massing is a direct response, again, to the narrowness of the site and working around the tree in the existing shelter. The area that is around the tree and the area adjacent to it under the front porch would become public outdoor amenity space, which is mentioned in the future proposed zoning ordinance as being required for future projects. The primary massing, or the upper stories, is approximately 69 feet from Ridge Street and over 200 feet from 4th Street. It nearly fills the site in the north-south dimension and extends west in an L-shaped form for the upper stories. The building height is 51 feet, calculated from the curb at Ridge Street, which is less than the max height of 52, so we're not asking, there is no ability to ask for increased height. And this is well under the max height of 142 feet, which would be allowable under the proposed future zoning ordinance. The dogleg condition of the site, as it wraps behind the fire station, will remain open for a private playground in the near term, and the possibility of expansion at that point in the probably distant future, meaning 15 or 20 years out, which is sort of the cycle at which Salvation Army has redeveloped for the last 50, 60 years. I have more to discuss about the architecture, but I can wait on that point if you want to do this in 2 halves.
Yeah, I think that might make sense. Let's talk through the SUP first, and then we can talk about your questions about the building. And this is not it's a little bit different because it's not an application, but I think that given the prominence of this project, we should definitely make space for public questions and comment. Do we have any public questions here in the room or online? Okay. Any questions? We'll speak first specific to the SUP request. Any questions from the board?
How many parking spaces are on site currently?
Right around the same number, 31, I think 32.
And how many visitors to the Salvation Army park on 4th Street? Is the neighborhood impacted at all?
I've heard from one neighbor who does feel like there is an issue with parking along 4th Street. And I think that's because the dinner service is when the Salvation Army sees the highest capacity of people on site. So I have asked if that particular neighbor, if they were open to permit parking along 4th Street as a solution. they didn't respond yay or nay to that, but I think that's a consideration to solve the 4th Street parking issue.
It's also one not in our control.
Right. So if they're in
Or-
favor
or-
of it.
or the applicant's
I-
control either, so
If they're
yeah.
in favor of it, Salvation Army is not going to, I don't believe, be against.
Can overnight guests park there currently?
Yes.
If I
they
were to
do park
spend the night there, I could park in the parking lot.
Correct.
Okay.
There's very few staff that run the Salvation Army, and so the parking is primarily for the overnight guests.
And how many on staff at the Salvation Army that are there during the day?
I think 3 full-time equivalents are,
Wow.
so, yeah, the major, they go with military titles, so the major just retired and is being replaced with a Captain Mark Van Meter, who arrived in Charlottesville this month. And he will generally run the Salvation Army. He runs the Salvation Army, it's his job. He's supported by the shelter program manager, and then there's another woman, Brenda and Barbara. One of them runs the kitchen and one of them runs the shelter. And then I think the other people are more fluid, coming and going, depending upon the day of the week.
And how about on Sundays? Are there people that come to worship at the chapel that may not be Salvation Army overnight clients?
Yes, there are people that come to the Sunday service, that is, I believe, like an 11 o'clock service.
And where do they park?
They are, I believe, allowed to park on the Noland site for the Sunday service, but it's not a formal agreement.
Right.
And would not be written as a formal agreement for long-term reasons.
Thank you.
I've got a question, and you may have mentioned this, but I'm sorry if I didn't understand it correctly. Is there a maximum setback off of Ridge Street?
Yes. It is on Ridge Street.
On Ridge Street.
Yes.
It's,
So it's a 20-foot max,
Okay.
10-foot min, and the chapel falls in
Right.
that range.
I think I saw somewhere the chapel's right at 10. Is that,
Yeah, I think it's just past it, but the roof overhang is in it as well. So
this slide
Yeah. the footprint.
in between the 2 lines there.
Okay, so it is tinted, because your, page 16 of your, document, I think said, 0 to 10. Or is, oh, wait, sorry, you're looking at the future zoning map. Got it,
16 is future.
got it. So you're not proposing any changes to the Ridge Street, setbacks, you're just proposing a change to the build to width?
Correct.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I just have a question about, I'm curious about so the building that's right behind the tree, does that have a basement in it?
Right behind the tree, no, it will
Yeah.
not have a basement. The only basement portion will be under the chapel.
Yeah.
Along that northern border. There's an existing basement in that same vicinity at the moment. The footprint of the basement's going to be slightly smaller than the existing footprint. And the whole, I mean, we're much further away from the tree in this proposed condition than current conditions.
With that existing building, the one that has the cross on it, does that have a basement?
That's what she just said.
Oh, that's the
Yeah,
one you're
and
talking about?
the current basement's larger than the proposed basement, but there's one currently, and there will be one underneath.
So, I don't think this one, well, I'm not sure that this has any portion under it. The basement is definitely under sort of a section
Oh.
of this one.
Yeah,
The
that's the
chapel
one
over
I'm.
here next to the tree does not have. a
Does not,
basement.
okay, I was just
Oh,
wondering, like, when
good.
you take that down, how that affects, I'm
Good.
assuming that, the tree doesn't have a whole lot of place to
Correct, so we're
grow its
not,
roots.
so our first floor elevation is going to be 4 feet above the sidewalk. And that is because the tree elevation is also
4 feet.
4 feet above the sidewalk. So we're not taking down the mound
Yeah.
that the tree is on.
That was
And
my
I,
other question.
and I may put that to the side because we're going to talk about the SEP first. So,
Okay.
and then but we can come back to that when we talk about the rest of the building. Any other questions? Do we have any comment from anybody in the audience or online about the SUP request? Okay, comments on that portion of the application?
I can start. I mean, I'm in support of the SUP request. You know, as far as, well, parking's not really our purview, but even if it was, we're getting rid of parking requirements in the future zoning code, so it doesn't really matter. The future setbacks on this stretch of Ridge Street will be 0 to 10 feet. So 10 to 20 is a little bit further back, but if, you know, their current design has the front of the chapel about at 10 feet, it's going to match what the future context could potentially be, you know, if they rebuilt the fire station or the Noland. And yeah, I don't really have any concerns with the not building to the very back of the property. I think that's a flaw in our current, or our proposed zoning code, that you have a required double frontage. I'm not sure where that's going to land. Jeff just left. We do usually get to put conditions on these, right, or suggest conditions to the planning commission?
We can.
Some conditions I might consider for this would be, well, one, if the tree dies, that they replant a tree that will eventually grow to that size. Two, to review some of the streetscape requirements that are in the new code, which require a street tree every 40 feet, and see if they can find a way to implement that in their current, or in their design. Also to review the screening guidelines as far as parking lots are concerned, so screening that parking lot from 4th Street. Yeah, and I think at some point, Roger, you might have mentioned this during the pre-meeting, but I agree with you. You do have a big blank wall that's about 40 feet long in front of the chapel. It's got windows that are up above your head, but I don't want to put a condition on that at this point, but that may be something that just for you guys to think about as you're developing the design, is what that feels like. I know it's not necessarily the sidewalk; it's your ramp up to it's a ramp that's on your property. So maybe it's the way you treat that planted area that's between the ramp and the sidewalk. Just something to think about. Yeah, so that's my.
Are those comments on this special use permit,
Yes.
the modifications? Okay, because you were talking about landscaping and trees.
I was.
And, okay, with
So-
regard to the parking, or, I'm sorry, I'm just,
Yeah,
because there are
so,
only
well-
3 areas that they're asking
They're asking for a
The-
setback. So
setback build to and the
Mhm.
parking requirements.
So, and I was proposing some conditions on it because sometimes the planning commission will say, well, you know, it needs to go to the BAR, but it needs to materially look like it does in the application. So that's why I was sticking some conditions on there, proposed conditions. Jeff, the ones you missed were just that they review the streetscape requirements in the new code and see if they can implement them in some way, maybe not exactly, but along Ridge Street. Condition that the tree dies, that a new shade tree will be replanted. And to look at the screening guidelines in both the new code and the BAR guidelines for the parking lot that's on 4th Street.
Any other comments?
I agree. I have no problem with this sort of layout whatsoever. I think it makes a lot of logical sense, and it serves, and it's, I think, an efficient land use while also respecting important parts of the site. You know, and then you've got the sort of issue of maintaining the operation of the place during construction, which is really important. And it does that as well. And you know, the fact that it sort of consolidates in one side so that leaves you the opportunity for further development, I think is also a really noteworthy thing. So, I'm in support of it.
Likewise, full support.
Was that a motion that you made? Okay. Because I thought all we're voting on is whether the SUP, as their request to modify the SUP will or will not have an adverse impact on the historic district.
We are, and I think
Okay.
sometimes we're allowed to suggest conditions that the
Sure.
planning commission could
I get
include. So
that.
that's all I was doing, is suggesting conditions to you guys that we don't have to include in our motion. Those just my thoughts.
Wouldn't the planning commission do that?
They would, but we can offer suggestions to them.
You're making a recommendation to council, but it does go through the planning commission. So, they can consider them and say, yeah, we agree or disagree, but ultimately council will decide, and on the recommendations or not, and certainly, I think the city attorney would speak up if there's anything that's.
Yes, we're just making recommendations, but in the past, when we've made recommendations for SUP, they've been very helpful as we've reviewed projects. For instance, modulating the wall on West Main, or the pass-through on the code building, or there were several others that were related to the SUP request, and we wanted to make sure that when it came back to us, that it was still going to be, fit the nature and the intent of our guidelines. So, to that extent, I think those are appropriate suggestions, and council can choose to make them a part of the SUP or not. For me, I'm in favor of the project, and I would just note that in part, I think some of the SUP request is actually evidence of this project actually taking consideration of its context, both in the historic district, the existing tree canopy, buildings across the street, and the adjacent neighborhood. So I applaud all of that. I think it seems like this is a project that is trying to make a better neighbors within this part of Charlottesville. Did anybody have any? Do you want a concern with it? Do we want to? I think there's general support. I guess the question is about the potential of these recommendations. Do you want to state them again clearly or make a motion?
Let me get up to the staff report. Okay. I'm taking use of this paper that Jeff keeps giving us. I move to find that the BAR recommend to City Council propose special use permit to modify the setback, build-to, and parking requirements for the redevelopment of 207 to 211 Ridge Street, and that it will not adversely impact the Ridge Street ADC district, with the understanding that the final design will require BAR review and approval. And we recommend the following conditions. That if the large oak tree in front dies, that another large canopy tree will be planted in its place, or one that will grow to be a large canopy tree. Not asking you to put in a full-size oak tree. That the applicant will review the streetscape requirements in the future proposed zoning code, and try to make this project compatible to the extent possible. Maybe not necessarily meeting it, but trying to meet the spirit of it. And we'll review the screening guidelines in the new code and the BAR guidelines in regards to the parking lot on 4th Street.
The second one seems a little squishy, and I'm not certain how they get another sizable street tree on this property with this approach that we've asked them to take related to preservation of the.
So the new zoning code is going to require a large street tree every 40 feet. The chapel design is about 40 feet long. So I would imagine that they could put at least one tree in that planter that they put in there, or 2 smaller trees or something to that extent. It would change the design, but it would also, I mean, it would, right now it's, you know, you guys have designed it so the chapel is very visually prominent, and I understand that would screen that, but this would also provide street trees on the street, shade trees on the street.
Well, that's like a 4-foot wide plant. I mean, that's a very narrow planter.
And maybe there needs to be some sort of push and pull that happens.
To me, I think that's a valid, you know, conversation to have, but maybe doesn't rise to the level of the SAP requirement.
Okay.
I think it's a certificate of appropriateness. I mean, I realize it's being, I wouldn't support anything because we think it's gonna be in a law that hasn't been passed yet. I'll just go out on a limb and say that. Now, Mr. Schwartz may think that whatever's been proposed in this Module C is gonna be adopted verbatim quickly by council, but I'm gonna go out on a limb and say, maybe not all of it. But I specifically, our job here tonight is based on the current laws. So, you know, to the extent that it's a better idea to put more street trees, sure. But with a view to some future law that may never be passed, no, I wouldn't support that, so.
It just was I was using it as an example. Well, yes, I can remove that from the proposed conditions. Not necessarily saying they need to meet a future rule, but just saying that it was it's a very good rule that they probably should meet anyways.
So you could rephrase it as similar to what you did with 104 Stadium Road, suggesting that council consider the following in its deliberations. And I would say that the, you know, as a special use permit, those conditions they do have teeth, whereas the COA, you know, could be appealed. At the same time, all of these are things, the 3 items, as I wrote them down, are things that you can anticipate in the COA and include as conditions of approval. Again, understanding that those are appealable.
I think we all would want to. I think Carl is trying to bootstrap that to our vote of no adverse impact, which I appreciate. I appreciate the ambition in it.
Well, in fairness, I think that, you know, some of the rationale for the setback, and I refer to it as the setback because it's the setback that has the build to requirements, but this is somewhat being done because of that tree. So again, a recommendation that be in the SUP requirement versus a COA, I think that's reasonable. I think that the reviewing of the screening, not sure, I think Ms. Lewis is right, it'd be difficult to anchor something to a draft, but that the, you know, council can certainly, you know, in the SUP, instruct the BAR to, that in the design review that the parking is appropriately screened from 4th Street. The only thing I could see Planning Commission or council asking it is, okay, there you have, when you're talking about screening, we're talking about just at the entrance, either side of the entrance, along that south wall, and maybe some clarity on the extent of screening and landscaping. But again, it would just be something, your recommendation to council is that these changes will not have an adverse impact, and now you're offering some things that they consider as conditions of the SUP.
Was there a
I'm
second?
happy to accept or
Was-
remove whatever you guys want to remove.
Was there a second there?
I'd feel comfortable removing the second one. I just felt like it was not clear what we were really asking, and it seemed like I think it confused the issue with the protection of the existing tree, which was our really important that request that has put a lot of this in motion.
Okay, so removing the second condition about the streetscape requirements. I'll accept that.
Was that so as a motion, do we have a second?
Okay. And I have accepted that amendment, just to make sure.
Thank you. Any other further discussion? All right. Mr. Timmerman.
Aye.
Mr. Burrell.
Aye.
Mr. Zemer.
Sure.
Ms. Lewis.
Aye.
Mr. Whitney.
Aye.
Mr. Schwartz.
Yes.
Mr. Badke.
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. All right. Thank you.
So for my clarification, Mr. Schwartz said three things.
Replant the tree and then the screening for the parking lot.
Okay, and they are in there as recommendations for
Yes.
council to consider. Okay. Thank you. Now,
Okay.
roll right in.
Yeah. Ms. Hannigan, this is a preliminary discussion, so please direct us how we can be helpful.
So, I'm going to give a little short indication of why we made some of the decisions we made, and then I would like to discuss the chapel comments. So, about the architecture. The stair towers in the base of the building are primarily expressed in masonry, with significant amounts of storefront on the first floor to create connection and transparency between the interior and exterior, and a robust active depth as promoted in the forthcoming ordinance, to help activate and provide interest from the public realm on Ridge Street. The chapel employs a butterfly roof and clear-story windows over a masonry base. Contrary to the remainder of the brick facade, street facade, sorry, the chapel is insulated from the street with a taller masonry base, which blocks noise and visual distractions at eye level for the occupants within, which are facing Ridge Street with a elevated stage on the end that is adjacent to Ridge Street. This condition with the butterfly roof and the clear-story windows allows natural daylighting, views towards the sky, and at night when illuminated would be a beacon or lantern on the street. The upper floors are clad in cementitious lap siding with interest provided at the fenestration, while a repetitive program faces the street. It's a series of apartments, two-bedroom apartments. The windows use different combinations of aluminum panels with a faux wood imprint and glazing to create a varied facade with depth, color, and visual texture. We've tried to be frugal with the materials and the detailing. This project is being funded by donations, and the capital campaign is in its early stages. The project is currently being repriced, and the reason I bring this up is to inform you that it may change before it comes back for the formal COA process because of, again, fundraising and pricing. So I'll take questions, but I would like discussion, I guess, of the chapel, given programmatically what's going on there and it having the higher masonry base.
Well, let's go with questions first and see if there's just clarify anything. I have one. The planter in the front of the chapel appears to be like a concrete in the rendering. Is that the intention?
That was the intention. So we are leaving the segment of the existing brick wall that is in front of the tree, so that the tree is not disturbed.
Right.
And it's being cut right about at the same point where there's an existing staircase that proceeds up to the main entry doors at the chapel.
Yep.
So we've left that staircase there. We removed a staircase that we had actually at the south corner near the intersection because we felt like it was cutting into the tree too much. That was in an earlier scheme. And the concrete planter is helping with the transition of the ramp that flows behind it against the chapel facade.
Right. Is there any other vertical concrete on the project?
No. There will be lots of concrete paving for all the sidewalks and as the brick wall comes across the face of Ridge Street, the idea was that it was going to be intersected with a concrete wall that's the cheek walls of the stair as it moves up to the main entrance. So it was all site related. open to obviously changing that material if requested.
I don't know that it needs a huge amount of discussion, but I'm not opposed to concrete in this situation, but it being the only vertical concrete on the project, it does stick out as a bit unusual.
I was trying to be in contrast to the existing brick, because we're never going to get the same patina and
Right.
age as the existing
Yeah.
brick wall to the left, but
Because this may be too early. Do y'all know what you're proposing to plant in that planter?
I don't think we've decided. I'd have to look Timmons is our civil and landscape, and I know they recently completed a site plan in preparation of augmenting this application with those type of materials, but I don't recall.
I think it'll
what's
just
in
be
there.
an interesting, as the design develops, I think it'll be an interesting conversation about if it's something tall enough, it could help to reduce the scale and size of the brick wall behind it, but it also then,
Right.
might make you feel enclosed when you're going up the ramp. So.
Exactly. So we had in our renderings a taller, almost like a crepe myrtle, something that was branchy and airy, but it did feel like, it's gonna branch over that ramp and kind of be right in your face as you're walking
Yeah.
down the ramp.
And block
So-
the views out of the windows, too.
Well, we weren't worried as much about that.
Okay.
Because they're up high, again,
Right.
they're
Well,
lifted.
Some crepe myrtles can get pretty tall.
I will just say for the record, I don't find the base of the chapel overwhelming at all. That's a narrow planter. It's only it's 10 feet to the wall. So it 3 feet of planter, maybe once you get that much soil in it, and then it's only a 5 to 6 foot wide walkway. So it could very quickly feel I don't know. It's just, I kind of like the approach that's shown in the proposal so far.
How tall is the wall at where the ground is the highest, so, what's the general height of the base? Is it 7 to 9 feet?
It's in that range. So the storefront that is at the first floor is 7 feet tall. There are 7 feet tall doors along the dining room, which is behind the porch.
Okay.
And as it wraps in this little entry lobby that comes over and hits the form of the chapel.
Yeah.
So the transition from brick to the darker material above is right at 7 feet from finished floor elevation, but again, you're starting to be depressed, so it's probably 9 and growing as you walk down the ramp to the north.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with the height either. I was just thinking that it would be awkward if they were a little lower and you'd start seeing kids going along as you're looking out.
Right. The idea was that you're fully concealing someone on the stage.
Yeah.
Doesn't feel like people are kind of looking over your shoulder.
Yeah. Well, one comment I would make is on the top left image, the sort of vestibule on the outside. In some ways, I'd almost like to see a more, because of the sort of enclosure aspect of the church, and you can't really see out. I'd be curious to think about, how that side might just open directly onto the sort of nice landscape, gives some nod to the historic tree, being able to sit in the chapel and look out and really kind of be in the sort of green space there, as opposed to look through the vestibule. That might be interesting, because right now the vestibule kind of looks like it's snaking along, which I think it makes a lot of sense on along the larger building, but then kind of the way it jogs forward. But just
Right, it goes far enough to get 2 access doors onto that
Yeah,
one
so-
side of the chapel for egress purposes.
Mhm.
So we'll have to look at that.
Yeah, I don't know if you can. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if there's a scenario where there's just a more immediate connection from the church into the landscape.
feels to me still, I know that you're dealing with setbacks, and I guess eventually we're gonna have maximum setbacks. It still feels like, especially when you're coming from downtown, that the chapel is sort of projecting too far, in my eye, into Ridge Street. And, you know, it's partially because of the height of the brick wall, but it's also, you know, the multi-story part in the back is more kind of in line with other things that are happening in the street, and then you've got this projection that sticks out. You know, it's really wonderfully elegant when you're coming to the other side, when you're coming towards downtown from on the other end of Ridge Street, where there's sort of a courtyard effect, but you obviously lose that when you're going the other way.
I will say that there is a planting bed along that north face brick wall that doesn't have anything rendered shown in it.
I see.
That would also hopefully soften the height of the brick wall
I think that would
facing
help
north.
a lot,
Yeah.
actually. We were talking about that before the meeting, that, to me, that's just as important as the planting bed that you've put towards the street.
Just remember, Roger, this is the next building you get to.
Yeah, yeah. I guess it's just the open area in front of the fire station, and then you've got Nolan behind it.
Yeah.
And so you've got this sort of wide open
Yes,
space with
right.
a shaft coming through it. I mean, again, future development, who knows? It's a very elegant building. I mean, I don't mean to, I think this is a really nice solution. I question, I mean, I know you're not this far along, I question the color of the four-story part. Seems a little bit too much contrast in my eye to the rest of the building.
I agree with that also. I don't know why that stuck out to me, but something about it, it seemed to emphasize, I mean, it emphasizes the egress shafts and makes it feel a little bit more hotel or like,
Yeah.
and I think some contrast is desired, but maybe
Oh,
it's
yeah.
just too much.
Yeah, and I like the different materiality. I think it's just a matter of maybe color.
Color
Looking
for
at-
the cementitious
For
siding
the
in particular.
hardy plank, yeah,
Yeah.
or whatever it is.
On the other hand, I think the materiality that you're suggesting down below is like, if you could actually get some kind of wood or natural material that that has a warmth to it, and it appears to be contrasted with a darker, sort of more shadowy or muted material. I think that could be really, really great for the project.
Right, so the elements that are between the windows on the upper stories, right now we're looking at a product, I don't know if I'm gonna say it right, because we haven't heard from the rep, but ATAS, I believe is how it's said, it's ATAS. It's aluminum, product that can have a faux wood print on it. And they also make soffit material and column covers. So the idea is that the slender columns on the porch are wrapped with the same aluminum column cover that would have the faux wood print on it to give it, again, warmth in the soffits. The underside of the soffits and the porches would also have that same material to bring the warmth, but without the maintenance of real wood, obviously, for something that needs the durability in this particular setting.
If I can interrupt, so I had to deal with this recently at the new Wendy's, which I reviewed for entrance corridor, and the building permit came in and very different, because the original was supposed to be all brick, but came in with the metal material on it, and the contractor had it halfway up the wall. So it was, all right, what do we got to do to help out here? So it was the red, which actually didn't come across as much as I concerned it would, but then it had a faux grained material that if it had been in a historic district, I would have really pushed back against it, because we don't want the faux wood and things like that. So but I think it worked there. But I would just, I don't know if you want to get into that much detail yet, but our guidelines really don't like, as we dealt with earlier today, artificial things. So I don't know. Go take a look at that. Go tell me if you like the Wendy's. I don't want to hear about the feather flags. I've heard enough. But that's the metal material that I believe Aaron is talking about.
We were doing comments, right?
Yep.
Okay. Just to follow up on the front, the sidewalk is what's more important. So yeah, if you've got a 10-foot wall against your ramp, it doesn't really matter to me. I think my concern is just the planter. I think offers some opportunity for, well, I guess Breck would disagree with me on this one, but if you made it just a little deeper, something taller, just to, as a pedestrian in the city, and this stretch of road is one of the hottest stretches in the city. Just everything you can get is preferable. So if there's a way to make crepe myrtles work without making it claustrophobic for the person going up the ramp, I think that would be better than nothing, especially since they'd be lifted up on that planter, so they'd be kind of like a little mini shade tree at that point. Anything to kind of get a little more shade on that sidewalk. I know it's not really a BAR. Well, it is a BAR thing. Our guidelines do talk about putting in street trees and creating an avenue effect. And I don't know that you've got enough. Well, you should, within 10 feet, you technically do have enough room for, shade trees. But with the design, you don't. So just, if there's something you can do to make it a little more.
Right, we looked at putting the ramp along the southern boundary line, property line, but again, then we wanted a stair adjacent to it, so you had both in the same location. It was just getting too close to the tree again, which is why it's wrapping to the north, plus most of the pedestrians are likely headed downtown for the day, coming from the building. So.
It doesn't have to be big, but just anything that could possibly overhang the sidewalk would be appreciated. But yeah, the design is fantastic. I think this is great. So kind of can't wait to see it come back.
Thanks. One of the other things I wanted to discuss briefly is, are there limits to the height of the fencing if it's open? Like at Sigma Chi, we had an 8-foot tall fence, but it couldn't be 8 feet until you got past the face of the building.
So it's a recommendation. Curiously, there are no fence limit height. You can build a 50-foot fence outside of the district. But to use the example like you had at Sigma Chi House, you all have the ability to modify the height. I think it's because we had a neighboring property owner and wanted it taller, and it was the way it was. It's as it comes closer, first comes past the face of the building, then closer to the street. So really, the intent is between the building and the street, it's lower, and certainly coming to the street that it's not, a continuous 8-foot or 10-foot. But you all can modify that height. It's just a guideline. And I think given the sort of the nature of this facility next to a commercial retail facility, we're not talking about a fence on Park Street that's gonna, not fit in.
So I bring it up because in particular, we're intending to ring the playground area in the rear with fencing, and also have it along the northern boundary line to the fire station. And then it sort of cuts the cross traffic that the client is worried about down, non-clients that are cutting through the property from 4th Street to get to Ridge, that are causing issues for the clients and residents that are on site.
Can you put some sort of vegetation buffer between the fence and 4th Street?
Yes, we are required to have a 10-foot buffer all along 4th Street because of adjacency to single-family residential. So the screening, I guess, at the parking lot will also be taken care of by the fact that there's a buffer there. We just didn't show that very well in the documents you're seeing currently.
But the short answer is no, there's no requirement that you have a fence of a certain height, and if it's taller than the guidelines, then it's at the BAR's discretion, but it's not an ordinance issue.
I think it will be in the future.
Yeah, I'm looking at that too. When that happens.
I have a question.
Sherry knows
actually.
something I don't know.
On the border between the chapel and the fire station, is that an existing retaining wall that's there now?
Yes, and it is mostly on the fire station's property.
Got it.
There's a portion of it at the very front that has like a little planter end to it, and just a portion of that crosses the property line, and we intend to take it back down, cut it off, because you're coming down the ramp and sort of landing right there, so that it's more gracious as it connects to the sidewalk. But some of that will remain, because obviously it's not ours.
That's where you should put the street tree.
It's kind of too bad, because that's an opportunity to sort of clean up that, that approach from downtown.
The crepe myrtles are also, that are between the two buildings, are the fire stations, not Salvation Army, so they'll remain as they march back through there.
Just one other thing I want to point out, is I really love, in thinking about this as an idea from a community standpoint. I just really love the idea of having this, Carl mentioned that this is such a hot street, such a lively street, and to have that space, that sort of, very much gathering space, the heart of this whole project, almost project out into that and do it in a way that's just opposite of the old one, which is closed and you almost don't know what it is when you drive by it. To have that transparency, it's really, I think just a benefit in so many ways, to sort of, so everybody connects with what's going on there. And I wonder if there's a way to even enhance that a little bit more, like create a little bit more verticality, in the windows, or just do something that makes it even a little bit more exalted and gives it a little bit more symbology. But it's just it's a great idea. It's a great form and application.
I think the massing is really nice. I really appreciate all the glazing and towards the Ridge Street side to be more open. I like the size of the planter, the ramp behind, the look of the chapel, how it comes out to Ridge Street. I don't have any issues with that. I do agree that the exact tone of the fiber cement siding does catch my eye, and it feels a little too creamy, but that's a detail down the line to figure out. As far as the wood metal, if it was a full wall of it like it is at the Wendy's, then I wouldn't be in favor of. But in this application, I really like the fenestration breakdown, and then doing the wood look metal allows you to have the exact same finish in the window, in the soffit, in the column cover. So in the amount that it is, I think it would be something that would be appropriate on this project. The one thing that did catch my eye, I feel like the brick towers for the stair towers might feel a little heavy, especially on the south side facing Nolan. So I know you're looking at budget and everything. I don't know if you'd want to bring more glazing into the stair tower, or if it would not feel as heavy if you save some money by not having masonry go all the way up. Maybe something to look at, that it might feel a little heavy, but in general, all the different pieces kind of come together really well. So just some small things to look at further on.
I agree. I think this is going in a great direction. The only other thing that I'd add is, as I've looked a little bit more at some of the existing photos, and inevitably as you're looking to find ways to save money down the road, is that maybe retaining more of the existing brick wall along the street might be possible, and certainly any portion of that front landscape that can be retained is going to be another way of lessening the impact on that tree. It might make some things easier. I know it doesn't go all as exactly as long as you need to. On the other hand, you'll be harvesting a lot of brick. There's good precedent at Westminster, right across the street from one of your projects, where they were able to to mix the brick in and fix a retaining wall pretty well. So that I still like the idea of a concrete or new addition kind of coming through to the street, being a new expression of the entry, but it just might be a little less invasive and a different way of having the ramp and other retaining wall behind it be a different material. Keep things simple. But any other things that need to be said? Any other things that you feel like you didn't get guidance on?
No. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. That is all of our agenda items related to applications. Jeff, I think it goes over to you at this point.
Share quickly. I'm not going to do this on this one. So, you should just I want to just give you all an update. The downtown mall has a constructed landscape with a period of significance from 1970s to early 1980s as a Lawrence Halpern Associates design. See you guys. And Aaron, John, I'll report to Matt on the recommendation, so he'll keep that moving, whatever that process is, but I'll get that to him tomorrow. Have a good night. So the mall was last Friday determined by the the DHR State Review Board to be listed on the Virginia Landmarks Register, and it will automatically now go to Washington for consideration as being listed on the National Register of Historic Places. So a nice win there, and as I think you all know, that the mall is already on the National Register as contributing to the historic district, but now it is it's also being acknowledged in and of itself. So that was some nice good news last week. The Carl's mentioned the zoning rewrite. I might defer to him to just a few comments. We at staff have been seeing things ahead of as it's been released and sort of offering, some tweaks and suggestions and comments, but it is now available or has been, and it's the section that's really it's getting into what the BAR does and how it does it. We still have to go back and address the section that talks about the districts and their definitions and all that. But what I've been working on is making sure that the process, that we have a clear process for what goes to the BAR, what's an administrative review, and what are the things that I can answer the questions for, and for example, yesterday the UVA or the Real Estate Foundation want to paint a building down on West Main, and the color is fine, but it's working towards that's different from that administrative review with the $100 fee and things like that, and so there's not I don't think there's a lot changing in the BAR side of things. I think it's in the entrance corridor primarily, but I don't know, Carl, from your seat, anything that oh, I'm sorry. The one thing that you all could maybe talk about is the composition of the BAR. I know I keep throwing my pencil over here. We had talked about because currently the composition is as we already have it, that we have either a landscape architect or a licensed contractor. And, you know, we sort of bounced around the idea of, well, it really is nice to have that landscape architect. So if we wanted any modifications or suggestions, that's one we could use some input on. And I guess now's the time to speak up. Any thoughts on that? Throwing you all under the bus here, and Carl, whatever you.
I mean, when I sent my comments into NDS, I included that, but I didn't include an answer. I said that we've got a couple categories where you've got two of somebody, and it could be an either or in that situation, rather than having either a landscape architect or a licensed contractor.
When is the comment
It's
period
over.
closing?
It closed as of Sunday.
Okay.
But it's, it's going to take them forever, so it basically just. There'll be public hearings, yes, but they wanted written feedback by last Sunday.
That's just for their,
Yes.
the comment period's not over until the council votes on it. And there are 2 public hearings before that.
If you have, it would be good to hurry if you have thoughts on this, is my point.
Well, suffice to say, it'd be good for all of us to catch up and to review this if you have not already. I just also forwarded, we did get some comments from Preservation Piedmont that you will receive in your inbox when you look at it. Can take those on board.
It's not a document for the weary. But this current Division 6 and 7 gets into the, I have not gotten caught up in the block lengths and things. I sort of try say where's the BAR involved, and we've been addressing internally, particularly with setbacks, where a great example is East High Street, where it's a very established 2 and 3 story buildings. They're all 30, 40 feet back. If suddenly something goes in and it's 8 stories and it's pulled to 5 feet from the property line, can the BAR, the BAR can still say, no, you should do X, Y, Z, but like the question is really, but if council's just gonna, if there's an appeal and council says we're not listening to BAR, which is sort of trying to get some, you can't eliminate the appeal, and you can't get council to say, oh, well, we'll respect what the BAR does, but to at least have some instruction in the ordinance about flexibility.
We did have a conversation about that briefly during some work session in the past. And I apologize if I'm
That's
trying
all right.
to find the email that Brooke just mentioned, and apparently went to spam, and anyways. So I mentioned the fact that, downtown you can have up to 10 stories, and it's, may not be appropriate everywhere, but it just let the BAR do their thing and decide when it is appropriate. And it seemed like there was acceptance of that. So I think we're potentially okay.
Yeah, I that's what I'm sensing is that there's to sort of strengthen that language of that what's currently there, that something, that a prevailing design, shouldn't be just ignored, that this isn't about, and I even made the comment that in a meeting was like, we're almost saying it doesn't matter what's there anymore. When and particularly with the entrance corridor, so much is what's here, and are we complementing it? And so I think there's some language in there that will be, but whatever. If you all, I think, reach out to us, or go online. You can read it if you wish. If you're really wonky, I know you all are busy, but it's also, we're all city residents, so this is sort of the design that we're going to be moving forward with. So even if we're not involved in this design process, it is something as a resident of Charlottesville to pay some attention to if you like. So that's, we are expecting sometime in July. We've been told, don't take vacation, don't go away, plan to be reading this thing sometime in July. And then, of course, that'll go through the sausage grinder again. I had added a note here about, in my questions, I was asked if, we're talking a lot about murals and things lately, and an idea was floated of, I'll try to make it as generic as possible. Can a wall be used as a sort of living canvas, and students paint on it and express themselves? My response was, if you would like to do a mural installation and art installation, we can follow those rules, but that I didn't think it was appropriate to have a concrete wall near Park Street become Beta Bridge. I just thought that was entirely inappropriate. I did offer that the BAR would, that, creativity and encouraging creativity and expression is part of what we all do, and we'd love to entertain the idea, but I just felt like that's something that was, hey, I'm going to go out and splash paint on the wall today, what was not appropriate. And I don't think you all would disagree with me, but I wanted to just get a sense, am I a curmudgeon? I am 60.
Can we point them to Belmont Bridge?
Oh, you know what? I think that's already being graffitied. But it's that idea of in lieu of a mural, that it becomes a, go on out, we're going to go paint on the wall today. I said, no.
Did this come up as like someone's asking?
Do they have a location?
A property owner?
And and my response was, if you would like to do a mural and have it designed and an art installation, we can have that discussion. I think allowing something to be a, what do they call it, a painting wall, like not Belmont, did I say Belmont Bridge?
No,
Jeanette's probably listening and get me. I feel like an active.
Well, we talked about that at one point in the conversation about the tunnel inside. There was some, but
yeah, I think that just a location within a historic district that is a random, express ourselves wall. I understand the intent, and I think something on the site could be considered and evaluated, but I don't think a wall along the public right-of-way. I think Beta Bridge has a tradition that goes with it, but anywhere else in the city, that's just not what we would.
Could they do another chalk wall?
I suggested that, and I that's the way I'm going to nudge them. So that's that. Just none of you all said, why are you so mean? So thank you. Another thing that a couple things came up today. I'm going to give you a homework assignment. We met at a lengthy meeting this morning discussing the lighting regs, which are still being tinkered with in the ordinance. Spent some time talking to Mark Schuyler. The new recommendation where they are is that the color temperature should be no higher than 2700K. I'm sorry, 2200K.
Ooh.
I said I could live with 27, and so that we have the 80 to 90, 80 CRI, preferably 90, perfect. But there is a
People don't make lights like that.
well, that's what we're working. It's interesting since, in the 3 years we've been having the conversation about lighting, and you all developed that recommendation for our lighting plan. I have noticed when projects come in, and I'm looking through the cut sheets, the lighting is now, coming. The LED is having a lot more flexibility built into what's available. I'm not saying it's a response to us, but they're responding to somewhere in the market is asking for these changes. So I see a lot at 2,700. I think we could go there easily to go to 2,200. Again, that's the recommendation. It is a policy because the BAR and the Planning Commission followed the BAR's lead. You are charged with applying conditions that reduce glare, brightness, so you can use your judgment on that. And that's how we had reached that 3,000 K and all that. So give some thought to modifying that. Maybe, do some, whatever, homework on it, however you want. I think we should have a discussion, because we are going to get projects that come in with lighting, and if we should be setting it at 2,200. No?
I mean, incandescent is 2,700.
Yeah, 2,200 is not readily available right now. I mean,
Okay.
you're going to be really limiting folks. If
I'm looking at a really dirty light
if
fixture
you're
right
asking
there
for
that
that.
looks probably 2,200.
Right.
Well, that's helpful. Well, then, it's incremental, and again, we can modify just as we did with clear glass and with the lighting. So, but it's something to give some thought to. That's the recommendation. The other one, I keep getting asked, but there is and Michael didn't mention it tonight, but they want to bring a mall train back.
Back? This is a thing that existed?
Yeah, well,
for
I don't know, it
Christmas.
existed at Christmas, so they want to have the mall train. And so I'm repeatedly asked if the BAR would support it. And I said, the BAR, as long as they're not parking it permanently or locking it up to a building at night, I don't think we have purview over the mall train.
This is like a little kid train, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
with some poor guy dressed with a
I think I
engineer
remember
hat.
that from like
Yeah.
30 years ago or something.
We've got some barriers around some fountains we could probably refashion into a little station.
Yeah. Curiously, in Halperin's, some of his renderings, he shows a mall train. And then just the last thing, I heard from DHR today, we did get our grant request to do the McKee Block evaluation. Cool. And that was to do GPR and just determine if there's anything underneath there that we should account for.
That's Court Square Park, right?
Did not get funding for the artifact analysis for Swan Tavern. So a bit of a blow on that one. But I have some discretionary funds available, so I think I'm going to try and find a way to at least initiate that evaluation. But a little disappointing we didn't get those funds. And I think the other update archaeologically is some graduate students did electromagnetic, I don't know what the process is, out at Penn Park, and believe that the area of graves is possibly more extended onto the golf course. So stay tuned on that one. But otherwise, thank you all tonight. Thank you for your help and patience on the sign thing. And I really, if you haven't gone down there and just stood and stared, it is pretty wild. So thank you. We adjourn until the barbecue, and thank you.
Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
We do, I think, to adjourn to tomorrow.
Yeah,
night
move to adjourn to tomorrow night, yeah.
At 6 o'clock at, what's your address?
221 Street, there will be no,
Wine Street.
no
Wine
business.
Cellar Street.
No business
Wine Street,
performed.
Wine Cellar
One
Street.
cellar circle.
The
Wine Cellar
annual, yeah,
We're on Wine
BAR
Street.
dinner, and, right, no business will be discussed.
All right.
My wife's making me clean the bathroom.
Aye.
It's really getting.
Any opposed can stay here.